Then I'm gonna.
Adam.
Okay, folks, here we go. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Council of the Corporation of the Municipality of Kincardine at 5 o'clock on October 9th, 2024 in the council chambers at the Municipal Administration Center. Roll call this evening, Deputy Mayor Clark.
Present.
Councillor Blackwell.
Present.
Councillor Kavanaugh.
Present.
Councillor Hinchberger.
Present.
Councillor Prenger.
Present.
Councillor Stanoff Gray.
Present.
Councillor Stewart.
Present.
And I'd like to acknowledge the many staff and guests that we have in our gallery this evening. Councillor Stanoff Gray, please.
Thank you. We would like to begin by acknowledging that we are meeting on the traditional lands and treaty territory of the Saugeen Ojibway Nation, which includes the Chippewa of Nawash, unceded First Nation, and the Chippewas of Saugeen First Nation, whose ancestors were the first to inhabit, care for, and live on this land. We recognize and deeply appreciate the contributions that Indigenous peoples have made, both in caring for this land and shaping and strengthening this community, our province, and our country. As a public service organization, we are dedicated to learning and acknowledging Indigenous history and culture, and are committed to actions that move us towards a journey of truth, healing, and reconciliation with the Saugeen Ojibway Nation, the Métis Nation of Ontario, and the historic Saugeen Métis.
Are there any amendments, additions, or deletions to or from the agenda this evening? Seeing none, I'd like to remind councillors to disclose any pecuniary interest now or as it happens throughout the meeting and the general nature thereof. So we need a mover and seconder that the minutes of the council meetings held on September 23, 2024 and September 25, 2024 be adopted as printed. I have a question. Okay, we need a mover and seconder, please. Councillor Blackwell, Deputy Mayor Clark. Are there any discussion? Councillor Stewart, please.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. The post-meeting minutes on September 25th, section 9.1, matters arising out of closed session. I need help here because number 4 said the potential litigation matter was provided for information. But from my understanding of the closed session, we actually gave some directions to staff, but that's not captured here. Is that correct? We gave directions to staff. So I'm a little confused. Because the two other ones, it said direction was provided to staff. I thought we gave some directions to staff. Help, please.
Through you, Mayor, to the councillor, on that particular item, no, there was no direction provided to staff. It was information presented to council by the lawyer.
There was no direction given to our staff. There was a process perhaps that was acknowledged by our legal counselor, but specifically there was none given to our staff for follow-up. So it could be splitting hairs, but like specifically to our staff, I don't believe there was any direction given. It was more to our legal counsel. So whether that's included as staff, I'm not sure the technicality of that, but there was a process that was being undertaken, just routine. Okay?
Yeah, that explains it. I just was a little bit confused because there was something given.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? All in favor? And that's carried. Matters for public participation. We need a mover and seconder. The council move into the Committee of Adjustment meeting, and upon completion, return to council. Moved by councilors Prenger and Hinchberger. All in favor? That's carried. So we're now in Committee of Adjustment. I'd like to call to order the Committee of Adjustment meeting of the council for the corporation at 5:04 on October 9th. Roll call remains the same. Once again, remind councilors to declare any pecuniary interest in the nature thereof. Adoption of minutes. We need a mover and seconder that the minutes of the Committee of Adjustment meeting of October 14, 2024 be adopted as printed. Moved by councilors Kavanaugh and Steinoff Gray. Any discussion? All in favor? That's carried. All right, we have a next on the agenda is a hearing for a minor variance, file number A 2024-012. And this is a hearing under the Planning Act. So we have two minor variances this evening, and later on in the open agenda, we have a planning application. The instructions regarding the process of the meeting remain the same for each one. So I'm just going to read it once and then remind you that we're going to do it again and again. So this is a hearing under the Planning Act. So if anyone from the public is interested in this application or wishes to receive a notice of the decision, there is an email address available from our planner this evening, Jake Boosfeld. It's the email is just too weird to read out. Nobody's going to listen to it anyway. So first, we're going to receive a report from our planning staff, and then the committee members will have an opportunity to ask questions. And I will ask them to reserve their comments on the application. You know, the questions you ask are technical in nature. Reserve their comments on the application till we've heard from the public. Then we'll hear from the public who are here in person, virtually, or have submitted correspondence to the above email that I didn't give. Members of the public are advised that the right to appeal the decision on this application is limited to specified persons and public bodies as defined in the Planning Act, or the owner or applicant of the land subject to the amendment who have provided oral or written comments to the committee on the application before the decision is made. So if after we've heard from the public, the committee will discuss and consider a recommendation on this application. So I now declare the hearing open and ask the planner, Jake Boosfeld Batisto, to present the application.
Thank you. Good evening, committee. So the first proposal before you tonight is file A12 Beeman. This is for a reduction in a rear yard setback from the required 7.5 meters to 5.5 meters. The proposal is for an addition at 39 Institute along the Bay de Doré shoreline for a 2-car garage with a 2nd-story addition. Portions of the existing structure are up to 2.2 meters from the rear yard. The bulk of the addition will be set back around 6.8 meters from the rear lot line, except for a turret feature, which would be 5.5 meters. So in considering the 4 tests of the minor variance, I won't detail all 4 of them, but instead draw your attention to maintaining the purpose and intent of the zoning bylaw. So the intent of rear yard setbacks is to maintain orderly development and adequate open amenity space. Given portions of the existing dwelling are 2.2 meters, the proposal to create an addition set back between 5.5 and 6.8 meters does not introduce a new form of development to the area. On top of that, amenity space is generally maintained. The applicant has detailed that the area for the proposed garage is currently used for open parking and would thus be replaced by sheltered parking in the garage, and that pushing further to meet those, that 7.5 meters would require greater tree clearing. I want to draw the committee's attention to two conditions which are proposed outside of the typical conditions 1 and 2 that you see. So the third condition relating to an archaeological study, a study was completed in consultation with Saugeen Ojibwe Nation. This gets into the technicalities of how these are typically approved. Typically, the report is done following completion of Indigenous review and engagement. The reports are reviewed by the appropriate provincial ministry and entered into their registry. We're experiencing delays in ministry review there and considered it prudent to keep the file moving through the approval process, leaving this last step as a condition. The fourth condition is for a survey to be done to confirm the existing and proposed setbacks and ensure that there's no encroachment into the municipally owned right-of-way along the waterfront. Finally, to note that Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority have reviewed and confirmed that their hazard mapping will be updated and that the proposal is outside of any hazard mapping. With these conditions incorporated and the analysis provided, we consider the application to meet the 4 tests of the minor variance and recommend approval.
Thank you for that, Jake. Are there any questions for the planner, technical questions from the planner regarding the application? Councillor Stewart, please.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I'm going to highly recommend, you pushed it through and there is some conditions and everything, but thank you for allowing that to go through speedy, because I know there is some delays outside of our control and your control. So well done. Thank you.
Just one for myself. This is a garage with residential space above. Is there a specified plan for B&B or residential? Does that residential unit above affect any of the land use in that particular area? Is that a concern at all? It's just kind of a yes or no question.
No.
Okay, thank you. All right, now we'll hear from members of the public. Is the applicant or agent present, and would you like to make a presentation? Please state your name when you get to the microphone for our record, please, sir.
Name's Dan Beeman. Jake has done an excellent job on it, pushing it through. And I don't think the one entrance, what we're doing is the building already has 2 separate sections to it. And by putting the one entrance, we're joining it and making it a 4-bedroom house. And it's now basically a 2-bedroom, and it's got a small bachelor apartment. And we're eliminating the bachelor apartment and just making it one house. So.
Thank you, Mr. Beeman. Is there anyone else here from the public who would like to speak in support of this application? Is there anyone here who would like to speak with questions, concerns, or objections to the application? Anyone with objections to the application? Jake, were there any written submissions that we should hear about?
No.
Okay. All right. Do any committee members have any final questions of the applicant or anyone? So now I declare the hearing to be closed and we'll consider the recommendation. So we need a mover and seconder that the Committee of Adjustment approve minor variance A2 2024-12 for Dan and Yvonne Beeman at the property located at 39 Institute Road to permit a reduction in the rear yard setback from 7.5 to 5.5 meters, moved by Councillors Clark and Kavanaugh. Is there any discussion? All in favor? And that's carried. Next on the agenda is a hearing for minor variance, file number 2024-031. Same rules apply for this hearing as the last one. I declare this hearing open and ask the planner, Jake Bousfield Bautisto, to present the application, please. I must be saying that really bad with the smile that comes on your face, am I?
Bousfield Bastido. For the record.
Bousfield, but
it doesn't matter. I'm used to it.
Hi, Jake.
Hi.
Welcome.
Yeah, that works.
Glad to have you here tonight.
So the requested variance for this file is a reduced rear yard setback for a shed at 558 Huron Terrace. The typical setback, from required 6 meters to a requested 2 meters. The typical setback for an accessory structure in a residential area can be 1 meter from a rear yard. However, for this particular lot, which is considered a through lot, given that Station Beach Road is behind it, there are specific provisions which require accessory structures in the rear yard to be subject to front yard setback, which in this case is 6 meters. So again, I'll draw your attention to the intent, maintaining the intent of the zoning bylaw, this specific provision related to through lots. So these provisions help to manage streetscape impacts to streets or lanes that would be abutted by a rear yard. The street in question, Station Beach Road, is not actually situated within that right of way. Rather, it's within a municipally owned piece of land along the beach. So effectively, Station Beach Road is buffered from development at the rear of the property by the 20-meter road allowance, which is maintained in a vegetated, semi-naturalized state. The proposed shed wouldn't physically encroach in the allowance and would not limit any future potential uses of that road allowance. The site is constrained by the large bluff feature bisecting it. Permitting this reduced rear yard setback would allow for the proposal to situate a shed and a pool in the future beyond the toe of the slope and outside the environmental protection zone, which Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority has reviewed and supports the request. Given the above, we consider the proposal to meet the 4 tests of the minor variance and recommend approval.
Thank you. Any technical questions for the planner? Councillor Blackwell, please.
Thank you. Through you. One of the comments is specifically about it being buffered from the Station Beach Road with that road allowance. When we did some of our waterfront master plans, there was some discussion about potentially in the future of how that might be organized a bit differently. If we needed to open up that currently vegetated road allowance, would you still recommend this if that was to be a road?
Sure, through you. If it were opened up as a road, of course, this structure would be situated closer than the zoning bylaw permits as of right. 2 things I would note there are there are quite a few properties, most along this stretch, do use that rear amenity space. I believe some even do encroach into the road allowance. So this proposal wouldn't physically limit any use of that space. Considering the streetscape impacts would of course be a consideration, but it would be a broad exercise along that stretch. Second thing to note, which I'm sure you know, is of course that it's very well vegetated now. So that would obviously be weighing into that decision.
One of the comments you made was that the pool would be put in the future. Is there I'm wondering about what future means, and is this minor variance for the shed, or is it for a pool sometime?
Right. Through you, the minor variance specifically is for the shed. The applicant has stated that they don't have a specific plan to install the pool immediately. But given the constraint of the toe of the slope, if the shed were situated to meet those setbacks, they would be limited in any possibility to install that pool. So to the letter of the shed, the minor variance is for the shed structure. It creates the ability for the applicant to build the pool in the future.
Further questions? Is the applicant or agent present this evening? Would they like to make comment? Apparently not here. Okay. Is anyone here from the public to speak in support of this application? Anyone here like to speak in opposition to this application? Any other written submissions we need to hear about? No. Okay. All right. Do any committee members have any final questions before we close the hearing and discuss the application? Nope. Okay. So I now declare the hearing closed. So I need a mover and seconder that the Committee of Adjustment approve minor variance A 2024-31 for Alex Osman at the property located at 558 Huron Terrace to permit a reduction in the rear yard setback from 6 meters to 2 meters, moved by Councilors Hinchberger and Blackwell. All in favor? And that's carried. And a mover and seconder that we adjourn at 5:19. Councillor Blackwell and Steinoff Gray. All in favor? That's carried. We're now back in open council session. Wow, we get to have a public meeting. Next on the agenda is the public meeting for zoning amendment file number Z 2024-051, and the same guidelines under the Planning Act are in effect for this meeting as were for the two minor variance meetings. So I declare the public meeting open and ask the planner to present the application.
Okay, thank you. The proposal before you tonight is for the rezoning required to facilitate surplus farm dwelling severance at 728 North Line. The severance, which would be considered by the county at a later date, is for roughly 0.6 hectare parcel containing an existing dwelling, which would leave a roughly 81 hectare farm parcel. The required rezoning is to prohibit residential uses on the retained farm parcel and apply a holding for the lands with high archaeological potential on both the severed and retained parcels. The proposal is consistent with the agricultural policies for surplus farm dwelling severances in both the provincial policy statement and Bruce County official plan, and as such, we recommend approval.
Thank you. Are there any technical questions for our planner this evening? Councillor Stewart, please.
Thank you, and through you, Chair, good presentation. Why don't we do the severance at the same time? You know, because they're gonna be back in no time to do a severance. Couldn't we do both of them together, or is just not allowed?
Through you, Chair, the severance is approved at by the county, and we have delegated staff approval to do those severances if there are no issues raised. So this doesn't go to county council for a separate decision. We will, while the appeal should it be approved, should the zoning be approved tonight by council, while the appeal period is happening, I'll prepare the report and send it to Monica for her review. And the approval can happen shortly after this. So they don't need to come back and submit an application.
That's what I.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, Councillor Stewart, county councillors only get the applications that somebody's raised an objection to. Like, they don't want to give us anything simple. It's always the complicated things to deal with. Any further questions for the planner? Is the agent or applicant here? Would you like to speak to the application? You all right? Okay, thank you. Pardon me. The applicant is Blair Scott, and he is here present. Is there anyone here who would like to speak in support of this application? Anyone here who'd like to speak in opposition to this application? Council, once again, any further questions before we get to close the public meeting and discuss the application? Okay, so and I declare the public meeting to be closed. And we need a mover and seconder. The council approves zoning bylaw amendment application Z 2024-051 for Bruce Lee Poultry Farm Limited, care Blair Scott, at 728 North Line, and the necessary bylaw be forwarded to council for adoption, moved by councillors Hinchberger and Clark, Deputy Mayor Clark. Any further discussion? All in favor? And that's carried. All right, to move on to delegations and presentations, I'd like to welcome Monica Walker-Bolton, Land Use Planning Manager, and Jack Van Dorp, Director of Planning and Development, who will provide an update on the new Bruce County official plan. And I realize this is in delegations and presentations, but we're going to be heavy on the presentation so that you're not limited to precisely 5 minutes for the presentation, okay?
Thank you so much for that. We're going to need about 20 minutes if that's all right with council. Thank you very much, Mayor Craig, for the introduction, and thank you to Kincardine Council for having us. It's my pleasure to present to you today the draft of the new Bruce County official plan. This draft has been a long time coming and represents significant effort from planning staff. From the beginning, we have worked with the consulting team at WSP, and along the way, we have worked with consultants like Watson and Associates, DBH Soil Services, and North-South Environmental, Inc. Today, we want to provide a high-level overview of the plan and receive questions. The official plan needs to be consistent with provincial policies and directions, including the new provincial planning statement, which was released at the end of August and will come into force on October 20th. It also needs to reflect the Bruce County context, and we will talk about the PPS a little bit later. To understand the Bruce County context, we completed the Bruce GPS project that occurred in 2018 through 2019, and it was an extensive public engagement that led to 8 guiding principles that are found in the draft new official plan. Discussion papers were prepared for each of the guiding principles from 2019 to 2022, and those included potential policy directions. Some of these directions were already addressed through a number of amendments made to the existing plan, and others were left to the new plan. These potential policy directions were largely incorporated into the new official plan, and in a few cases where they were not specifically addressed, it was due to conflict with provincial direction, or we felt it was better addressed through other planning tools like in local official plans or strategy documents. And the slide that I have up now provides a summary of all of the, a high-level summary of what was included through the Bruce GPS and what was included in and what was not included. But moving on, much of the work in preparing the plan was completed through various amendments to the existing county official plan, including additional residential units policies, agricultural policies, a housekeeping amendment, the growth management and servicing policies, which was another standalone amendment, and the implementation policy amendment. Other policies from the plan, the existing plan, continue to remain relevant and appropriate and are also included in this new draft official plan. To make it easier to follow what's changed and to understand the difference between the current policies and the proposed new policies, we have highlighted policies that are unchanged or only modified slightly from the currently approved plan policies by coloring them gray in the draft and marking them up as indicated on this slide. White text in the background is a new or more substantially modified from the current plan. In terms of structure, the proposed plan consists of 6 parts, which are outlined on this slide. The first 5 parts lay out the vision, growth forecast, countywide policies, policies for designations, and then implementation policies. Site-specific policy amendments that need to be carried forward will be gathered together in Part 6, which staff are still compiling. As I promised earlier, here we'll introduce the new provincial planning statement. The new provincial planning statement directs that for growth planning and specifically population projections, we are to follow the Ministry of Finance forecasts. This is already a standard practice and what was used in formulating the new draft Bruce County official plan. The province approved the countywide growth forecast in August. The province regularly issues new forecasts, and we will monitor growth relative to these forecasts. The plan horizon to 2046 lines up with the duration of the current forecast. One function of growth forecasts is to plan for land budgeting, As in, is there enough land in the regional market area to support growth over the plan horizon? Focusing on regional market area presented some challenges in Bruce County in terms of focusing on the whole county as the market area and then having to review changes relative to that county-wide land supply. We provided comments to the province on this when the PPS was under review. Now, the new provincial planning statement has removed requirements for comprehensive reviews. This solves that county-wide issue, but also opens up our communities to risks that proponents can apply to expand municipal boundaries, settlement area boundaries, whenever they have land. And if they appeal, they can appeal a refusal to approve a municipal settlement area boundary expansion, which could impact our ability to shape communities. So to address this, we have included proposed policies in the draft new Bruce County official plan that provide direction and criteria for boundary expansions. And this will help ensure that municipalities are able to direct where and how they will grow for the benefit of the whole community. Through this plan, we have been working to structure policies wherever possible to point to provincial direction without duplicating the direction. This is an effort to reduce the need to amend the plan if provincial direction changes. We could yet take an opportunity to point more directly to collaboration with school boards in the new plan, as is highlighted in this slide. The new draft plan also maps natural heritage and water resource systems. This system approach for the new Bruce County official plan reflects direction that was established in the 2014 PPS and is carried forward in the 2020 and now the 2024 PPS. And we'll talk a little bit more about the natural heritage and water resource systems in a moment. We will now take you on a guided tour of the official plan. And staff have been gracious enough to allow Jack to navigate some interpretation tools that we have available on the Plan the Bruce website. So the mapping that we have up here is an interactive tool that's available for the public to be able to compare the current schedules in the Bruce County official plan with the proposed draft. So this first slide that we're looking at is for Schedule A. It has the same general content as the current Schedule A. Agricultural areas are now defined by property boundary as opposed to previously following a soils mapping. And so what that resulted in is in the past, some lots would have a mixture of some prime ag and some rural, and that made it difficult to apply policies. The agriculture maps were prepared based on a land evaluation area review analysis that was completed by the province. In that provincial review, the first cut had 3 components: recommended prime agricultural land, non-prime, and potential prime. Planning staff took that output from the province, and with WSP and DBH Soil Services, we reviewed and refined that output from the provincial LEAR to create the 2 designations proposed in the draft new official plan, agricultural and rural. We then did a check-in with local municipal staff and to derive the proposed schedules. The plan text recognizes the agriculture system as an important economic contributor to the county's economic prosperity. Agricultural areas will be allowed 2 additional residential units to align with the new provincial planning statement. This is an increase up from only 1 permitted in the current plan. This means that the policies for agriculture and rural lands will be the same when it comes to additional residential units. We've updated open space lands to include land trust and NGO lands that are eligible for provincial conservation land tax incentives. We've incorporated the best available hazard land information from conservation authorities, and we've merged shoreline, inland lake, and travel trailer park and campground into 1 new designation. Schedule B is a transportation map that shows all of the county highways, local roads, provincial highways. It's the same general content as the current Schedule B transportation. I just received a note that we might have the slides flipped, that North might not be pointing up. Schedule C constraints is the next map that I wanted to take us through. Natural heritage constraints have been removed from this map and now appear on Schedule E. Other than that, the same general approach is taken to the constraints map. It shows features that might constrain developments such as known gravel deposits, landfills, and other features that development needs to stay away from. Schedule D is the source water protection mapping. The viewer that we have available shows the data that will be in the plan as a series of maps as they exist in the source protection plans. This way, they can be easily updated in the county official plan when there is a change to the source protection plan without having to go through a formal amendment to the county official plan. Schedule E is the natural heritage system mapping. The current viewer includes the areas of natural and scientific interests and provincially significant wetlands that are currently within Schedule C of the plan. And the proposed mapping has quite extensive natural environment features. The county has a tremendous natural legacy that includes the Huron Fringe, which is an important migratory bird pathway along the Lake Huron shore and is home to the Greenock Swamp, the largest forested wetland in southern Ontario. The plan builds on the legacy of conserving natural heritage features for current and future generations to appreciate that has been already established in the current Bruce County official plan. We should note that the current county plan predates provincial direction established in the 2014 PPS that requires an identification of the natural heritage system, including features and areas and linkages that are intended to provide connectivity and support natural processes. So although the way the natural features are now illustrated in the new draft county official plan might feel new, this is implementing provincial direction that has been a standard Ontario-wide for over a decade. The plan has also adopted distinct approaches for northern Bruce County and southern Bruce County. For northern Bruce County, based on the relative abundance of natural heritage features, the focus is identifying and protecting the largest areas of intact habitat, which are known as core areas. For southern Bruce County, the core area approach is not used, but instead focus on maintaining key features and the system of relatively smaller forests, and then the linkages like river valleys that connect nature in an interconnected system on the landscape. We have included an annotated legend in the PDF schedules that describes criteria for development within the natural heritage system and adjacent lands. And when you're using the viewer, you can click on a feature and the development criteria will pop up. High-level policy direction for the features is available in the interactive version. Within the policy, we have sought to be generally aligned with the provincial planning statement. There are areas where we have gone beyond the provincial planning statement. For example, extending protection for more wetlands than just those that are identified as provincially significant. Provincial direction already requires that we protect and prohibit development within provincially significant wetlands. The county plan also includes larger unevaluated wetlands in this protection, such that the policy would not permit development in the feature, and development adjacent to this feature would have to demonstrate no negative impact. In these features, existing agricultural uses are allowed to continue. Another new direction that we know is of interest, we had a lot of questions at the open houses that we hosted last week, is the systems-based approach to the natural environment system and how linkages are a part of this. Linkages illustrate the interconnected nature of the natural environment features on the landscape. Within linkages, the policy would be that existing uses can continue and the linkage functions should be maintained. So when you're reviewing the natural environment map, and Jack is highlighting them now, there are local level linkages, which are noted in purple, and then there's county level linkages that are noted in the broader yellow band. A linkage that crosses a farm field between two forest patches does not require the farmer to make any change to their farming practice. If there were a major change, like a gravel pit proposal, for example, then enhancement of the linkage function could be required. Again, there is no impact to existing uses. The linkages identify how nature moves across the landscape, and existing farm fields, roads, and even existing buildings are a part of that existing condition. Not all of the natural heritage features could be mapped. Valley lands are not mapped, however, development pressures are generally not seen in these areas due to natural hazard constraints. Significant wildlife habitat and habitats of threatened species and endangered species are subject to change as species are added or removed from the list, and provincial or federal law applies to these endangered and threatened species habitats regardless of what we have in the Bruce County official plan. These habitats can include things like vernal pools, which are springtime pools that are temporary where amphibians breed, or another example would be bank barns where barn swallows nest. It would be impractical to attempt to map all of these significant features in the county official plan. We did aim to identify features and areas that include many significant wildlife habitats, such as the core areas that I mentioned earlier, and habitats that would be suitable for endangered and threatened species also occur here. We have shown natural heritage systems conceptually within settlement areas, where a local official plan adopts different mapping in their settlement area than the county official plan. The intent would be to incorporate the local mapping into the county plan. We have shown that there is continuity of natural features between the county and Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, Chippewas of Nawash, unceded First Nations, the national parks, and the Bruce Power Site. However, the plan does not assert any jurisdiction in these areas. Moving on to Schedule F, which is the water resource system. The provincial planning statement requires that we identify a water resource system. This includes surface water features and groundwater features. One area that is new is the mapping of significant groundwater recharge areas. Kincardine has some of these areas, although the extent of these areas is not as great as several other municipalities in Bruce County. Some reviewers of our plan have questioned how these areas will be regulated. The development criteria here is to maintain recharge function by avoiding or mitigating intensive development and large impervious areas. So the criteria apply to intensive development and large impervious areas, like a large shopping center parking lot, for example. For development at this scale, minimum landscape open space requirements and good stormwater management could be used to address this requirement. The policies in the draft plan do not address manure spreading, which is regulated under the Nutrient Management Act. We appreciate there may be some concerns about the level of detail at which these maps are produced relative to the scale and water resource needs of settlement areas, and we will examine this in further detail as we go through the engagement process. So now I've concluded the tour of the schedules to the official plan, and I wanted to move on to cover our requests for boundary adjustments. We have received various boundary adjustment requests as part of this process, some from municipalities, some from landowners, and some have been identified as possibilities by staff. We have bundled these requests into a package that's attached to your agenda. We are not yet providing a recommendation, yes, no, or indifferent on the proposed boundary expansions. What we're doing right now is collecting input from the public and municipalities on what their wishes are for the requested boundary expansions. We anticipate that through the public engagement process that is going on right now, we might receive some additional requests. During this phase, we will consult with the associated local municipalities that have requests in their areas, review and assess the requests based on a set of criteria that's outlined in the draft new official plan. And at the conclusion of the public engagement process, we will be in a position to make a recommendation on the requests that are noted here, and others that may emerge through the engagement process. The next slide in our presentation is some highlights from the official plan text. So the bulk of our review of the official plan was based on a tour of the mapping schedules, and maps do tell a really good story about what's proposed for the new official plan. But some things from the text that maybe didn't come across in the tour of the schedules. Bruce County Council recently endorsed an Indigenous Reconciliation Framework and Saugeen Anishinaabeg Reconciliation Pathway and Action Plan. Building on this, the draft plan centers Bruce County within the San traditional territory and builds on the work of the implementation amendment to update Indigenous consultation policies to highlight areas of critical interest to San, including environmental impacts and especially shoreline hardening as having potential to impact San interests in fish and water, and fish habitat. The draft plan has a strong housing focus and maintains minimum density requirements, supports a range and mix of housing, supports as of right additional dwelling units where possible, and identifies affordability targets. The plan also recognizes that the Housing Action Plan and Housing and Homelessness Plans provide higher levels of detail to support action to increase housing supply. The draft plan incorporates the Growth Management Amendment, which has now been approved by the province, and encourages appropriate intensification to make good use of existing infrastructure in settlement areas. The plan recognizes agriculture, tourism, and energy as strategic economic drivers, and also supports the diversification of the economic base, supports the master transportation plan, and envisions complete communities in a thriving region with easy access to housing, jobs, recreation, and services. Just going to make a few remarks about the relationship between the county plan and local plans. The plan recognizes a role as an upper tier plan, the county plan, but it is also the plan for local municipalities, because in 7 out of 8 of our local municipalities, it functions as the plan in effect in the countryside. Those plans only focus on the settlement areas, so there's a need to provide planning direction for the countryside. The plan is trying to get out of the business of requiring frequent amendments. Right now, the current county official plan has well over 300 amendments. For example, one of the ways we're getting away from frequent amendments is a county official plan amendment would no longer be required to create a quarry or gravel pit in a designated mineral resource area. This would still require a zoning bylaw amendment, which is a local approval, and of course the MNRF license. The county plan provides criteria that the local council can use in reviewing the zone change. This approach is more streamlined than requiring both a county official plan amendment and a local zone change. Right now, we have a county plan and 8 local plans. County official plan, local plans all include plenty of detail in various areas. What we're aiming to do as a planning service is streamline these documents, to say things once and say them well. Given that the plan must provide detailed policies for areas where local plans do not apply, our approach is to set up and give the opportunity for local official plans to have several options. They could either refer to the policies of the county official plan rather than restate them, or they could restate them and have a policy that permits an updating of that restated policy when the county plan has to change for some reason, for example, to line up with provincial direction. Or local plans can provide their own policies, provided that they do not conflict with the county plan. This approach represents an opportunity going forward for the collective bulk of our planning documents to be reduced, to make work we do in planning more efficient, and focus on providing local context where it makes sense. I wanted to take a few moments to talk about an issue that we've been working on, drinking water protection relative to permitting development on private or partial septic systems. The policy changes we have proposed for the draft new official plan stem from our effort to manage tensions between development and groundwater protection that exists due to regulatory gaps between the planning function and the building code function. In consultation with chief building officials countywide, we have broadly identified some areas where the official plan could provide appropriate flexibility for promoting new development like additional residential units, even when development is happening on private septic systems. County staff have engaged with officials from the province to understand the ministry's expectation around the interaction of these two policy areas, specifically how the building code, official plans, and other legislation are intended to interact to protect groundwater and support health. At this time, we're at a point where the ministry has acknowledged that they understand these issues and are committed to providing a response. We are now at the engagement phase of our county official plan project, and the slide up here just shows sort of some of the immediate timelines that we're within. We have just completed a week of 4 open houses. Online engagement opportunities continue on the Plan the Bruce website. Hard copies of the draft new official plan and schedules are available in the reference section at local libraries and at our county planning hubs. We are looking for feedback to support a return to council in early November on the boundary adjustments and engagement themes that may result in tweaks and changes to the plan before we get to county council's direction to proceed to a statutory open house and public meeting. If there are significant changes required to, based on the feedback that we've been receiving, then the timeline that I just had up may need to change. This concludes my presentation, and we are happy to receive questions from council.
Thank you, Monica. Thank you, Jack. You were well spoken tonight as well. Good for you. Any questions from council regarding the report? Councillor Steinhoff Gray, please.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I just have one question. I was watching the maps where you're showing the differences between our current state and the draft, and it seemed like we were trying to do a better job of defining those heritage resources, like water significant areas, where one of the things I've noticed since coming to council is a lot of times we'll approve things, but many years go by and we haven't done anything with them. So if any of those approvals that have gone through are contradictory to what we're doing now in the official plan, would there be any retroactive activities to try to bridge up that zoning?
Interesting thought. So, through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm thinking that the premise of the question is that there may have been a county official plan amendment, and right now myself and staff are going through all the previous county official plan amendments and determining whether they need to stay in the new draft, because 300 or so amendments do definitely bulk up the plan, and we want to keep it nice and streamlined. So it's interesting that you note it that way, because I've been kind of looking at it on the other side of the same coin, is if there's a development, if there was somebody that applied for a county official plan amendment and went through that process to get an approval, and the development that they had hadn't gone forward, I was taking more of a conservative approach in my recommendation that those changes might need to stay in the new official plan. But I like your perspective that they should also, those few that are proposed to carry forward should also be looked at through a lens of, do they continue to be consistent with the proposed policies of the new draft official plan? So I appreciate the question, because it's making me think of a planning issue in a different way. And I would say that the good news is that so far we're only finding a handful of amendments that would fall into that category where the development didn't go forward. And now that you've given me that idea, I think that it would be feasible to look at them through that lens. And the approach that I would probably take to that would be to work with the senior planners for the affected jurisdictions, so Peninsula Hub planners or Lakeshore planners, and ask them to work with me to evaluate that question.
Thank you. That's a great response.
Councillor Kavanaugh, please.
Thank you very much, and through the chair, thank you for your presentation. I have a question about the population projections. You said that they were approved by the province. My question is, do these plans include consideration for the mega projects that are possibly coming forward, like Bruce C in Kincardine or the DGR in South Bruce?
Thank you for the question. So the forecast that was prepared, I just did a lot more work on that, so I was really eager to jump in. The forecasts that have been prepared do not include those projects for which no decision has been made. So these forecasts are set up assuming based on a set of assumptions on what we know to be the condition. In the event of the approval of one or both of those projects, there would be a need to reopen or re-examine the growth forecasts for the area. And we understand that municipalities are working to try to understand how those impacts might, or how those projects might impact growth forecasts, and that there might be a presentation later on today's agenda in that respect.
Thank you very much. And just as a follow-up, is that an intensive process to get that population projection re-examined, or is it a fairly straightforward process that would happen hand in hand with one or both of the projects going ahead?
Our hope would be that there would be a high level of coordination around the forecasting associated with the growth that could occur in the context of those projects.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Stewart, please.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. This might take a little while. I'm actually a counselor in Ward 2, and that has a huge impact on the maps. And what you're doing here is fabulous. I mean, it really is. I mean, it's taken a long time, but I think you're getting there. Just a couple of concerns. I'm not going to take a lot of time. I know that Jack and I have a separate meeting and everything a couple of weeks away, but I just want to mention a couple of things. I'm very busy this weekend with Turkey and people coming to visit me because, as you might not be aware, Ward 2 has a lot of seasonal residentials. And sometimes they feel that we do planning without them. But they're more than welcome to come to my place, and I've been getting a lot of phone calls because that's just the way it's going to be. So we'll try to make do and try to meet the schedule. One thing that came to clear to me is the Tiverton. Tiverton, we were hoping, and we didn't quite see it in the plan, and Jack, you and I talked about it. It's that red zone. It's called the Pine Tree Trailer Park. And we thought, talking to the staff, that that was a little more than just an owner's wish. We thought it was maybe, and I don't need an answer now. I'm just trying to say this is something because for the council, this is a real great opportunity for us. There could be 50 to 60 affordable home sites. So we're a lot eager to have this built into the Tiverton plan. They put the water and sewer, the infrastructure there. It looks like part of Tiverton. So I'm hoping that we can work it out and it becomes part of the settlement of Tiverton. The other thing I just wanted to talk about is the lake shore. We weren't aware in our plan in 22 that it was actually secondary urban community all along the lake shore. I find it, and people are having some sort of problem because as a secondary urban sort of community, you expect all the infrastructure to be there. It's very limited. The infrastructure is very limited along there. And even the two projects that are being proposed are having problems. It's not so much community. We got to work better with the community and the developers and really understand that whole area and how to develop it. And it's going to take some time for community and developers and the planners to all come together on it. So that's going to be a little bit longer, but you can see from your maps and your interactive maps, I hope they're available pretty soon for us, whether we need the computer, because they're excellent. But we see a lot of the natural heritage in that area. We see a lot of yellow, which is basically the water generation. It's a challenge when you start to develop along that strip. So we will be continuing talking to you through the community and through our course council. But thank you very much. Great presentation.
Deputy Mayor, please.
Thank you, Mayor, through you. Thank you for your presentation. I know one of the issues underlining was consultations, and you've identified that you're having open houses in October, November. I'm pleased to see that you've listed sort of the various groups that you're also engaging consultations with. I think from a legal perspective, one of the biggest challenges is lack of consultation. How's the engagement been so far with regards to this?
Thank you for the question through you, Mayor Craig. We actually were very pleased with the turnout that we had at our open houses. Typically, it's hard to get people interested in official plan policy. In my experience, in my planning career, you get folks out for zoning bylaws comprehensive reviews more so than you do for official plans. But we have been pretty proactive in promoting things on social media, also through all our county platforms. The Plan the Bruce website has been a tool for public engagement since the beginning years of the project, like the 2018, 2019 time period. And that's a resource that some of the followers of our project have known that they can go back to that to receive updates. But in terms of like kind of organic, citizen engagement at the open houses, I was personally very pleased with the types of conversations that we were able to have. An example would be we partnered with the Bruce County Federation of Agriculture to have an open house before their AGM in Tara. And there were a number of farmers that I was able to speak to there. And I had a conversation with a couple, and through our discussions, they learned that the proposed designation on their property would change from rural to prime agricultural. And so I talked to them about how if they were concerned about that, they could put comments in. So I think we are having the effectiveness in those types of conversations of bringing the awareness that we're looking for through public engagement.
At the end of the day, does the updated official plan make our planning and, hopes for future development more efficient, less efficient, more challenging because there's a lot more detail? What happens to planning staff at the county level? Are they bogged down, or are they have a big knapsack taken off their back? Which way do you see this going?
So our hope would be that, and the way that we've structured this plan is that when complete, it will reduce the application load, particularly of joint applications where we have a project and we have to have a public meeting here and a public meeting there, and then another thing to get it all approved. Trying to get those down to one application. And there's a number of areas where we have been working, and you see that through all the gray text in the plan already, where we've been cleaning up policies that were duplicative or caused routinely triggered applications that there was no real planning issue per se. And so through that, we've actually reduced the number of applications to amend the county plan as it exists drastically. And so we look forward to concluding this project and then starting to work with local municipalities on the version of that we can do with you to also make your plans as efficient as possible while making sure that they're good plans. And so we put all the energy into writing good policy as opposed to more policy.
Very good. Jake, Monica, Jack, thanks so much for coming tonight. Talking all things planning, we do appreciate it. It is way more exciting than what you give it credit for, maybe. So thank you. All right, moving on, and to the Beeman family, thank you so much for being here. Like, you're welcome to stay if you want, but now you can put your head down and sneak out the side door. Now nobody will. So I'd like to introduce Isabel Turcott from the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada, and Doug Wiley from the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, who are here this evening to make a presentation regarding the proposed Bruce C project. So just to that end, I'd like a mover and seconder that we receive the presentation regarding the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission and the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada for information with respect to the Bruce C project. Moved by Councillors Kavanagh and Hinchberger. Isabel. Doug, welcome.
Thank you. So my name is Isabelle Turcott. I'm here on behalf of the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada. I am a manager, with the Review Panels Division. I'm here with my colleague, Doug Wiley from the CNSC. Who would like to introduce yourself?
Hi there, my name is Doug Wiley. I'm an environmental review.
Just a minute, before you go any farther, I'd like to invite you up to sit at the table here where our planning staff made their presentation. The microphones are better, and it's just a long time to stand there. So welcome to the inner sanctum.
Perfect. We appreciate that. Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Council. All right, so we're here to talk to you today about the integrated, sorry, did you finish introducing yourself earlier? Go ahead.
I was saying Doug Wiley. I'm an environmental review officer with the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission in the Environmental Review Division.
Which one it is already. There we go.
And they do have a great team of staff here with them as well, so you don't go sneaking out anybody. So so it's, even though Doug and Isabel are presenting, they come well supported.
Absolutely. And we can turn to our colleagues if there's any specific questions through you. So we're here today to talk about who we are, what we do. We're also here to focus on participation and consultation opportunities, as we have been informed that was the interest of the council, and also about the next steps for this process. So we each have a part of the presentation. We'll try to keep it simple and happy to go in detail if there are any questions. The Impact Assessment Agency of Canada is mandated to conduct federal impact assessments. Impact assessments at the federal level under the Impact Assessment Act aim to enhance positive impacts of projects and to mitigate adverse effects. We could also coordinate the consultation with Indigenous peoples for the whole of the federal government in these processes. When it comes to designated nuclear projects under our legislation, those have to be conducted as an integrated assessment with the initial license from the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. So essentially, should the projects be approved, the first licenses that the proponents apply for would then be decided upon and issued to a proponent. So I will go in more detail about what those integrated assessments are about. We are dividing our process in 5 phases. There's also the pre-planning phase, which is a little bit of this invisible phase at the beginning, where we get to know the community. We help proponents when it comes to questions that they would have about the process. We also build relationships with Indigenous nations and communities, and then prepare for the initial project description to come in. In this case, the Bruce C proposal was submitted to the Impact Assessment Agency and reviewed, and started the planning phase on August 12th, 2024. So we are currently here, and I'm going to go in detail in each steps of that phase, and then I'll start to talk about the next ones. So as I was saying, we are currently in the planning phase, just at the beginning. So the agency received the initial project description and has accepted it, posted it on its website. We immediately started a comment period. It is usually about 30 days. It is currently suspended for additional engagement opportunities. We are in this comment period currently until October 28th. After the comment period is done, what the agency will do in collaboration with the CNSC is to issue the summary of the issues that we heard during that comment period to the proponent. That summary of issues requires a response from the proponent, and based on that response, the agency will determine whether or not an impact assessment is required. That usually happens within the first 80 days of the comment period. Upon decision that an impact assessment is required, if that is the case, the agency, in collaboration with the CNSC for an integrated assessment, then moves on to drafting impact statement guidelines, as well as 4 plans that are required in our legislation. The impact statement guidelines really contain all of the requirements, both for the Impact Assessment Act and under the Nuclear Safety and Control Act, for the information and studies that the proponent is required to submit. So that will form what we call the impact statement. The 4 plans that are also required, as showed in the slide, include a public participation plan, which contains all of the participants that we've identified, all of the public participation opportunities that are provided, and also a timeline and a timing for those opportunities so that participants can effectively contribute to the assessment and be heard. There is a comment period right after those drafts are done for comments on the guidelines and mostly on the public participation plan. So we'll go and seek comments on maybe where we should go, at what time of the day do people want to be consulted, in what ways would be more effective to reach people, like information at libraries or any other means. Snail mail even is something we do. So the other plans that we do are the Indigenous Engagement and Partnership Plan. We also have to draft a cooperation plan, which outlines how we will work with another jurisdiction, in this case, the province of Ontario. We also have to draft the permitting plan to make sure that it is transparent to all what the proponents' permits could be. And there is an option there to provide that information as part of the impact assessment process. Once the plans are finalized, as well as the guidelines after the comment period, the notice of commencement is issued and we move into the impact statement phase. So I'll talk about public participation for a moment. It's very important in our process that we provide public participation opportunities. It is a cornerstone of a fair and transparent process. So our goal is that members of the public who wish to participate have the opportunity to do so, that they're provided the information and the support to enable them to participate in an informed way so that their input is considered as part of the process. Opportunities include commenting via the Canadian Impact Assessment Registry. We also come and do events like this where we could talk to information session, open houses, or other meetings by organizations with an interest. We have video conferences online, information sessions. The CNSC often hosts webinars as well. And in the process, the assessment phase, pardon me, one of the key opportunities for participation is a public hearing. So I'll talk a bit more about that later. The registry is also where people can find all of the information. It does consist, bless you. It does consist of the record of the assessment. So I didn't necessarily explain that in detail yet, but these assessments are referred to an independent review panel. A panel is a quasi-judicial administrative tribunal. They look at a record for their assessment. So the registry essentially consists of the record for the assessment. So in that record, you can find comments from participants. You can look at information about the project. You can look at active notices, etc. We also have a participant funding program, which helps funding recipients prepare and participate in key stages of the assessment. It can cover several different kinds of fees. All of that information is available via our website. What the types of people that are eligible for these processes include individuals, incorporated non-for-profit organizations, and Indigenous groups. The slide here contains information on how to apply and certain examples of eligibility requirements, which are as general as having knowledge relevant to the assessment, having expertise on the project's potential impacts, and having just an interest in the potential impacts of the project. So I already spoke a lot in detail about the planning phase. So the planning phase really is what it stands for, planning. The outcome of the planning phase are those guidelines that I mentioned. That is a very substantial, detailed document. There is currently a generic example on our website. When I mean generic, I mean applicable to all sectors, not just nuclear, given that we look at other sectors in Canada. And the 4 plans. Once that phase ends, so as I was saying, as you saw earlier, it is a legislated timeline of 180 days. We then move to the study phase. So that's the impact statement phase. That is the time that the proponent takes to provide all of the information and studies that are required in the guidelines. It is also a phase where the agency with the CNSC will draft the terms of reference for the panel that will conduct the assessment. Once the agency and the CNSC have determined that all of the information and studies have been provided as part of the impact statement, we then move to the next phase, which is the 3rd phase. However, before that happens, the agency and the CNSC will consider comments from Indigenous groups, the public, and all experts on the impact statements. So that phase also contains a major public participation opportunity for a period on comments on the impact statement. Should the agency and the CNSC find that there are deficiencies in the impact statement, we can ask for further questions of the proponent or other experts to supplement the impact statement. Should that be the case, additional comment periods could occur on additional information. Once the agency is satisfied that everything has been provided, then the review panel is established. That review panel is integrated, which means that it will look at both the requirements under the Impact Assessment Act and the Nuclear Safety and Control Act. In the case of Bruce Power, we anticipate that the license to prepare site is the application that is integrated. So the panel would look at that as well and recommend conditions to the government if that approval went forward. The panel will hold also comment periods on their public participation, their public hearing procedures. So you would hear from the panel how they intend to conduct their hearing, when it should be, how participants can register, and that is something that there is an opportunity to comment on. There is also the opportunity at that time to participate and contribute via participation in the hearings, which mean preparing presentations or written submissions, and including participating in person. Once the panel holds their hearings, they then write their report. Once the report is written and submitted to the minister, then the agency and the CNSC do a next little phase B of number 3 on my slide, which essentially allows them to make recommendations on the conditions that the panel has recommended. Once that happens, then the decision goes up to the governor and council, which is a fancy way for saying the federal cabinet of ministers. So the federal cabinet of ministers makes the determination of whether or not the project is in the public interest based on conditions, based on the factors in our legislation. If yes, then the decision statement is issued and the conditions for the project are also issued, most of it which would go in the license by the CNSC, who is then the life cycle regulator and takes over the role for the federal government for the whole project. And Doug will talk about that more after I'm through. If no, then the impact assessment decision is posted with the reasons for the decision. Phase 5, should a project be approved, then the proponent can go into activities such as, in this case, license to prepare site. And though in terms of the CNSC, that actually does not lead directly to construction, there are additional licenses that need to be applied for. So to recap what I said earlier, the key opportunities for participation that are upcoming, well, currently it is on the initial project description. The next major comment period and opportunity to participate will focus on the tailored impact statement guidelines and the public participation plan. In the impact statement phase, there will be an opportunity to review the impact statement and the review panel terms of reference. Once the impact statement is deemed to meet all of the requirements for information and studies relevant to the project, the panel will then start its work and will seek submissions from the public and hear presentations to the panel. Important dates to remember: the current public comment period ends on October 28th. We anticipate, so these are tentative dates, that within our schedule, the summary of issues of the proponent would be issued on November 7th. We could decide that whether or not an impact assessment is required by December 13th. We anticipate the comment period on the draft tailored impact statement guidelines and plans would occur in winter 2025, and the end of the planning phase would be around spring of 2025. So again, these are tentative dates. There are external factors not always in our control, but all in all, the legislative timeline is 180 days. That does not change. Over to you, Doug.
Thank you, Isabel.
Just if I may interject, is it appropriate to ask if council has questions of yourself, Ms. Turcotte, or whether Mr. Wiley's presentation rounds it out? Like you've given us a lot of information, spurred on questions, but if you need both halves to make this presentation complete, so I'm not sure if Doug will be answering questions that you might have presented. What is your preference here? I'm gonna offer you the opportunity to do that. Which would you like?
I think I would like my colleague to continue because he will give the full picture of what the CNSC's expertise is, especially the process after the decision is made should the project proceed.
Okay, Mr. Wiley,
Thank you for
please.
the question.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Craig. So I am going to give a broad overview of the CNSC and our role after the impact assessment has concluded. So I will also add that I am remiss if I don't say it, but I am joined here by colleagues Jeff Stevenson, who is the site inspector at Bruce Power Nuclear Generating Station, and Samuel Jabi, who is the licensing lead for the Bruce C project, alongside myself, who is leading the coordination of our integration with the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada.
So that leaves one support staff at the back. Can you introduce her, please, Isabel? We don't want to leave
Yes.
anybody out here.
Yes, I'm joined here by my colleague Marie-Claude Robillard, who works with the review panel division as well. So thanks.
Thank you. Threw you a curveball there. So this slide really is an introduction to the CNSC. It speaks to our 3 pillars of the CNSC's mandate, and I'll try to limit my use of acronyms. Apologies there, but the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. So it is based on the regulation of the nuclear industry to protect the people and the environment, also to implement the peaceful use of nuclear energy in Canada, and to disseminate objective scientific and regulatory information. The CNSC's commission is a quasi-judicial tribunal of experts and complemented by CNSC staff who support the commission and conduct regulatory oversight activities. As previously mentioned, we are the life cycle regulator of the nuclear industry in Canada. So that is all the different areas of regulation, and essentially those commercial uses of nuclear energy, also the industrial and medical applications and research as well. The CNSC's robust regulatory framework is predicated on the enabling legislation, which is the Nuclear Safety and Control Act. And as we move down this triangle, it gets to more and more detail on our nuclear regulatory framework. So the onus is on proponents and licensees to show us how they meet our requirements. Specifically for the Bruce C project, we are working very closely with the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada to integrate our requirements into their process. So as mentioned also before, the Bruce C project, speaking specifically, is right now seeking the license to prepare site, but we are a multi-phased life cycle regulator. So it begins with the site preparation and then moves into construction, operation, and decommissioning, at which point each different life cycle phase is handled through a public hearing. CNSC's regulatory oversight is based on 14 safety and control areas. These are technical topics where we have various subject matter experts. Each subject matter expert would be responsible for assessing, evaluating, reviewing, verifying, and reporting on regulatory requirements and performance of a proponent or licensee. So how is CNSC oversight carried out? Well, there are various different methods of inspections. We review many reports, also direct follow-up through those. And we also conduct engagement and outreach, like today. The next few slides speak in detail to some areas of interest. I will admit I'm not an expert in these areas, except for the last one, which so I won't speak too in detail, but I'd like to include these slides as informational purposes because they are full of great information. On this slide, the regulations speaking back to the regulatory framework, certification of packaging for transport occurs through the packaging and transport of nuclear substances regulations, but also adherence to the transportation of dangerous goods regulations. And the CNSC has staff that oversee these programs. So similarly, I am not an expert in emergency management, but again, I like to include these slides for the informational purposes. We do have experts in both of these various areas. And essentially, so this is closing off for the emergency management. The basic principles are that there is an assessment done, which is the planning basis. The emergency response plan and procedures is then described. There is practice and readiness that goes on into the emergency management. And then those programs are reassessed and effectiveness is reevaluated. as for the environmental protection framework, so this is mostly described through the regulatory documents of 2.9.1 and 2.9.2. I'll also add that all of CNSC's regulatory documents are available online for your reading. In these documents, they explain the requirements and guidance we have for proponents and licensees at large. For existing licensees, we rely on an adaptive phase management approach of an environmental risk assessment, and this shows that process. So the environmental risk assessment is revised on a minimum of 5-year cycle and is updated with new data, which is collected by the licensees and updated based on new science developments as well. They touch on every aspect of the environment, and so that also includes the human health risk assessment and the ecological risk assessment. And that is it for me today. Thank you.
May I add just a key takeaway messages in the requirements that Doug was explaining on the last slides? Those are the kinds of requirements that I was referring to earlier as being integrated within our tailored impact statement guidelines. So thank you.
Council, questions for Ms. Turcott or Mr. Wiley? Councillor Stewart, please.
Thank you, and through you, Chair, thank you very much for very informative. I actually live at Inverhuron, so we're the closest community to Bruce Power. I just have, other than looking at our comprehensive zoning bylaw over the next little while and then our official plan, I've been working on my comments on the impact assessment. My problem is, Isabel, I hope you can help me. I'm trying to get some funding, but those things are a little more difficult to fill in than I thought. Is there anybody that can help me fill in for some participation funding programs? Because every time I look at it, I almost go crazy. So I know it's pretty self-explanatory, but it's not. If you're not dealing with it every day. So is there somebody, or Cole's Notes? Sorry, I'm showing my age. But is there some sort of version I can actually? Because there's about 3 or 4 I would like to apply for. Thank you.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Yes, definitely there is support. The participant funding program has a generic inbox, and we can put you in contact with folks there who are good support to help with filling the applications. The application for the current public comment period for the Bruce C process closed, I think it was on September 13th, but there are several other ongoing, and there will be more. So you can either email the public funding participant program or contact us, and I can put you through the right people as well.
Thank you very much, Isabel.
Councillor Kavanaugh?
Thank you very much. And through the chair, thank you for your presentation. To take it a little more broadly, Councillor Stewart was referring to applying, I believe, as an individual representing. And I'm more curious about how the municipality can participate. Your slide mentioned meaningful participation, but we actually have an agenda item later tonight about our budget presentation, and looking at what it would cost, or what the estimated cost, what it could be for the municipality to sort of participate fully. Seems like a lot to sort of push onto our taxpayers, especially in 1 year. Is there processes or ways for the municipality to secure funding to meaningfully participate?
Thank you for the question, through you, Chair. Currently, our participant funding program does not include tax-based organizations, so the criteria for eligibility unfortunately, would rule out funding a municipality directly. I can speak from past experience. Municipal citizens have themselves required funding through the participant funding program to look into information that they were really interested about, which was related to socioeconomic conditions, health conditions, environment, etc. So that is one of the ways that the citizens can look into getting funding to support review of information or their own contributions that would also be of interest to the municipality. And other than that, we don't really have visibility or don't necessarily intervene directly with proponents to provide funding, but that is something that could be an avenue that we've also seen in the past. And I don't know, Doug, if you have anything to add?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. So the CNC in the past has encouraged municipalities, because we likewise cannot fund municipalities through our persistent funding program. However, we've encouraged municipalities to reach out to the Canadian Association for Nuclear Host Communities, who can access funding for the municipality and who can direct funds to you. And I believe that's it.
Maybe I'll direct that comment back to our CAO, because I believe we already have. And could you comment on the response for that, please?
Sure, through you. Yes, so CANIC did put forward an application for funding through to CNSC. From what I know, that was declined. What was shared with me, that was declined. It was referred over to IAC. An application was submitted before the deadline, and to date, we haven't heard yet.
Yes, Mr. Wiley, please.
If I may, through you, Mayor, I will take that back to the CNSC and our participant funding program to look into that further.
One of the questions, and I'm not precluding any other counselors if there's ones to follow up. I appreciate the cooperative function that IAC and CNSC seems to work together. You know, there's one that's begins the process and one that continues on, but I'm sure there's cooperation back and forth. And I'm wondering about the function of IAC and CNSC, whether in the midst of the conversations, whether it's the planning or evaluation or submission of reports or whatever, are you a mediator, an adjudicator, an enforcer? What's your level of authority here? Yeah, well, I know that's the official title, but I'm wondering if, like, when push comes to shove, where are you in the pecking order here?
Yes, in terms of thank you for the question through you, and it's a very, very good question. We are almost all of those things, depending on what time of the process that we are at. In terms of the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada for nuclear projects, obviously the life cycle regulator will always remain the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, but during an integrated assessment process, it is led by the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada, according to a memorandum of understanding that's actually on our website, and that's freely available for integrated assessments between our organizations. So at the beginning steps of the process, I would like to say that almost for the entire time, we are a facilitator. It would be the word that I would use. So we do administer the entire process from start to finish. In terms of our duties and our expertise, we will then always use the information that is publicly available on the record in order for us to perform our work. So it does include looking into the expertise from all of the federal authorities, including the CNSC, Fisheries and Oceans Canada, Environment Canada. If there is provincial expertise on the record, also comments from the public and municipalities, we use that information, and maybe in that sense, it's not necessarily a mediator, but you could kind of go as far as saying that we take all of that information, look at the concerns from Indigenous groups and the public, everything that's on the record, and we summarize that and turn that into requirements to give the proponent. So then we become a little bit an adjudicator in judging whether or not the information and studies that a proponent provides are satisfying the guidelines. So there is a decision there. When it comes to referring the impact assessment process, the mandate for the review panel, that integrated review panel is independent. They are unbiased. They are not members of government. They are free of conflict of interest, and they have to have specific expertise. So in that sense there, the agency and the CNSC do become technical, administrative, logistical supports, but that panel does function on their own independently. The agency does have a duty to give them support in terms of staff, but all of that process is also cost recovered from proponents. I think I forgot to mention that. So that's it. Yeah, so everything and it depends.
Everything in it depends. Councillor Hinchberger, please.
Thank you, through your chair. A lot of people won't go into the depth that you will go into, but so people can get a idea of scope. If we were talking like a radius from the Bruce Power site in terms of assessing, if you get to an impact assessment for a Bruce C project, what kind of scale are we talking about?
Thank you, through you, Mayor. That is an excellent question. It's not based necessarily on a radius when we're looking at the impacts of a project. We're looking at the whole life cycle. Our legislation, in terms of designated projects, stipulate that it's for site preparation, construction, operation, decommissioning, and abandonment. So in terms of the scope for the timeline of a project, we're looking at all of it. Of course, the level of detail would not be as advanced for some of the phases as others, but we have to consider all of that into consideration. In terms of the geographic scope, it is in the guidelines stipulated that it is dependent on what we call valued components. So when you're looking, for example, at the presentation that the County of Bruce gave earlier, they talk about species at risk. They look, depending on the species, what their habitats are. And in terms of their habitat, how does that link to water quality, hydrogeology, et cetera? So the proponent has to define geographical extents, including for health and socioeconomic conditions, of what is going to be affected by the project. So it is project dependent and dependent on the valued component. So we usually go as far as the region, especially when it comes to cumulative effects. So there's a long list of policies and best practices in that area, and we can work through specific examples if you wish.
So like using the fuel cycle as an example, depending on the reactor type chosen, whatever fuel it might use, you may reach as far as where that fuel is mined, manufactured, et cetera, as part of the whole thread all the way here, correct?
Thank you, through you, Mayor. So that also is a question of an analysis that needs to happen by the agency during the planning phase that we're in. When it comes to the tailored impact statement guidelines, because they have to include all of the requirements for the project and the project effects, we need to define what the project is. So does the project include activities that are incidental to it? So there is a summary of that analysis that is typically posted when the guidelines are finalized. And I'll take, for example, the topic of, I think it was the Delta Port fourth berth out west. There is consideration of marine shipping and transport, like rail and road transport, and that was, I believe, included in the guidelines. So similarly, when you're looking at transportation of fuel, transportation of waste, transportation of construction materials, those are all questions we currently have. And through the planning phase, we'll get the information to figure out how they fit in the assessment, if they're part of the project. Are the cumulative impacts related to the project, or are they issues relevant to the assessment? So all those concerns are important to put on the record.
Deputy Mayor, please, you had a question?
Sorry, thank you, Mayor, through you. I had a couple of questions. One was from phase one or stage one to stage three, is stage one effectively when the proponent has provided all of the necessary information, so sort of the notice of determination, is that stage one?
Sorry, good question. I wonder if I can re-show the slides. Is that possible? I can start answering while the slides are showing up. So the 5 phases I was talking about, so when you're talking stage 1 to stage 3, that would be the planning phase number 1, impact statement phase number 2, impact assessment phase number 3. So the planning phase really requires, in order to start, that the proponent has satisfied our requirements on what needs to be in. Thank you. Oh, am I controlling it? Okay, thank you. Yes, so phase 1 requires, in order to start, the initial project description has to contain the information that's required. So Bruce Power has done that. The information requirements were completed, so then it was posted and started. The other requirements for the proponent in that phase is to respond to the issues that will be sent to them. The next is really on the agency and the CNSC with all of the participants to fulfill the requirements of information that we need to build the guidelines. And those guidelines need to reflect the concerns that are on the record and address all of the areas that an impact assessment has to look at. Now, the phase number 2 really is in the proponent's hand. There is in our legislation up to 3 years for a proponent to provide all of the information and studies from the guidelines. So that is what I believe might have been referred to as being satisfied that all of the information and studies required by the guidelines have been provided. So that does include, like as I was saying earlier, a period where there is public participation opportunity and there is a review of how much information has been provided and does it meet the requirements of the guidelines. When it's then in phase 3, once that's a yes, we're satisfied, the information has been provided. Once that has been done, then the assessment actually is referred to the independent review panel, who will then test whether they have enough information to do the impact assessment report. So their mandate might include to actually get information from other parties. It's not limited to just the proponent, and they will ask questions, and as an independent body can test whether or not what is provided information is sufficient and adequate, and make recommendations accordingly where they might see gaps and uncertainties.
No, thanks for clarifying that. My second question was perhaps going back to Councillor Stewart's initial remark. We're looking at the public engagement portion of it, and I appreciate that there is the opportunity for the public to effectively write in terms of responses. Part of the legislation requires it to be obviously meaningful consultation. And how are you finding the engagement process when it's perhaps it's maybe not as straightforward for a lot of individuals to complete that? Because it would seem that it doesn't meet them, it wouldn't necessarily meet the legislative requirement of meaningful if it's becoming more problematic or difficult for them to properly engage.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. That is a very good question. We really do our best to identify what obstacles exist for meaningful engagement. We've been very proactively trying to understand that with the community, and we have had support from the municipality of Kincardine as well as Bruce County to identify where to go, when to go. We have identified already that we should spend the next month of July and all of the events around the community. But there are still obstacles that exist, and really looking forward to hearing what your comments might be on that topic, what the obstacles are in terms of potentially like language barriers and access to information, so that we can plan to address those as part of our public participation plan.
Thank you. Just a quick follow-up. What I was really thinking about is that there's certainly going to be certain communities and accessibility where that's going to be create barriers in of itself. And I appreciate that allowing the opportunity or the forum for the public to engage is one thing in terms of trying to satisfy the legislation. But the way the legislation is worded, it's very clear that it's to be meaningful. And I'm grateful for the indication that you're trying to get feedback on that, because I have that concern that it may not be meaningful if people are either put off with the process and aren't diligent in trying to find the supports that are necessary to get that completed.
Thank you, Mayor, through you. Yes, I welcome those comments. If you have any specific examples, we would really love to hear about what we can do in that regard. Yes.
So I'll throw in a question here. The process will, the impact assessment process is asking for individuals and ourselves, and I know lots of agencies have put in, these are the impacts that will be evident because of the proposed project. And I'm wondering, when the impact assessment agency receives them, they start doing their investigation. Is it a process where, a person might say it's going to impact my flower bed? and you say, well, okay, but we need to do some research to find that out. I know CNSC has a great team of scientists and researchers and all that to do that background work. But the Impact Assessment Agency, does it have the wherewithal to do the research to assess those perceived impacts? Or do you receive a report and because we received it, we believe it? Or is the municipality, like when we get requests for information, is it incumbent upon us to have our staff do all the research and verify what was submitted, or is that your job, or how does that process work, please?
Thank you, through you. That's a great question. Let me formulate my thoughts for a moment. So the information that we receive on the record is not information that typically we generate. So the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada has multiple policies and technical guidelines on how to properly conduct impact assessments. And we mainly rely on technical expertise from federal experts, provincial experts, and the rest of the information that is on the record, including what is provided by the proponent and other participants, as well as especially the CNSC in this case. When it comes to a concern that's been provided by someone, one of the first questions on the registry is, one, is it relevant to the project? If it's not relevant to the project, obviously the agency with the CNSC, and when it's the panel, would weigh that information accordingly. If it is relevant to the project, but there is a doubt or there is something on the record that indicates that the information might not be adequate and accurate, then there is the possibility for the agency and the CNSC to raise that concern and request the proponent to provide a response. Once the independent integrated review panel is appointed, they can then, if they're not satisfied with the evidence on the record, if there is a big discrepancy between what one party says versus another, they can request external technical review if they don't feel like they have a reliable third party. So that's kind of an example of how it would work.
Councillor Hinchberger, please.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Having worked for some time for the proponent, that might not be obvious to a lot of people how the regulatory environment is very much such that the proponent has the obligation and the initiative to show the regulator. The regulator doesn't generally do the work for the proponent. The regulator specifies what's required, and it's up to the proponent to do much of the analysis, whether they can do it in-house, contract it out, or whatever. There, I think that it was described earlier that the IAC's role is largely one of facilitator to make sure that the process is followed. And from the nitty-gritty related to the technical parts, that's where the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission would have the expertise to know what the proponent must provide to them in order to be reviewed. We get a little bit mistake here, because we're in a discussion here with IAC and the CNSC, but we're missing a stakeholder that's central to the whole thing, including the lion's share of the work to be done, which is the proponent.
Is there an opportunity to comment? Or
No, that
Not a
wasn't a
question.
question.
All right.
Councillor Stewart, please.
Thank you. Just to finish, because a few people mentioned through you, Chair, my name and everything else. It's interesting because the municipalities' issues are my issues too, as an individual. So it'll be interesting to see how they sort of deal with an individual, but we could expand it to the municipality too. Example, traffic and impact of traffic, especially in the community right beside, that impacts the municipality, but it really impacts us. So it'll be interesting to see how these submissions go and how you deal with them, but I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Turcott, Mr. Wiley, thank you so much for your presentations this evening from the Impact Assessment Agency and Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. We do appreciate the guidance you've given us tonight.
Thank you for the opportunity to come here.
Thank you.
So we had a motion on the floor that we received the presentation. All in favor? It's carried. Do you want your bio break now? Okay. Hey, folks, I'd like to go home tonight, so thank, you can bring your food back to the table, but we're gonna start. Okay, here we go. Moving on in the agenda, we have 6(1)B 2025 budget plan report. We need a mover and seconder. And this is the fashion that we will go through this motion, just so that you are aware. We have 4 very specific parts to this. So with your permission, we will get consensus on the first one and move on to the second one, get consensus on the second one. They are individual and separate, and you know, even though we can put it in the context of budget and want to talk about trucks and capital purchases, that's not the issue tonight. Here's the 4 specific things. So we need a mover and seconder. The council received the 2025 budget plan report for information. Further, the council approved the 2025 wage increase using the 12-month July CPI of 2.5 as per Human Resources 03 compensation and benefits policy, and the 2025 budget be drafted to incorporate the economic increase accordingly. Further, the council approved provide direction on the maximum 2025 property tax increase inclusive of the annual asset management funding requirement of 3%. And further, the council directs staff on any proposed service level reductions or expansions for 2025, moved by councilors Deputy Mayor Clark and Councilor Hinchberger. All right, so for focus, without wandering around too much, can we reach consensus that we receive this budget plan report for information? Okay. Next bullet here. Further, the council approved the 2025 wage increase using the 12-month July CPI of 2.5 as per our compensation and benefits policy, and it be incorporated in the draft budget accordingly. Okay, we're good for that. Further, the tax council provide direction on the maximum 2025 property tax rate increase inclusive of the annual asset management funding requirement 3%. I'd like some direction from our Director of Corporate Services. When I read this, it wasn't, what you're asking at this point is not based on empirical and numerical evidence. It's based on, broadly speaking, where are we at in our thought process? We know that we read your report, we read the influences on our budget. And I think what you're saying is, do we agree with the 2 to 4, 4 to 6, 6 to 8, 8 to 10, that sort of thing? Is that what you're looking for, Director?
Yeah, through you, Mayor. So in the context of the report and the information that's provided, and I do have a couple of updates to share with council, but yeah, everything that has been provided in the report is based on the existing service levels and the cost to continue providing the services that we are already providing the community. So knowing what's in the report with respect to the expected tax rate increases, and I'll provide my update now if that's okay, or did you want me to wait?
No, additional information is a good thing. So if you could provide any factors that are influencing our thought process one way or the other. And if I heard you correctly, and if I'm thinking logically the way this goes, we're thinking of that comfortable number, politically correct number, based on identical service levels from last year. And if we adjust the service up or down, then that changes the tax rate up or down.
So through you, I would say, like, what is a realistic tax rate increase if there's a maximum that council wants? Because so to proceed with my update. So if we're looking at the chart that's provided in the report with respect to the total preliminary budget impacts, currently we have and it's just a preliminary. There's lots of things that are still going to change, but at this point in time, we had an operating budget impact estimated at 1.633 million. So what that means is an additional levy requirement of 1.633 million in some fashion, whether it be taxes or through rate increases. And so that is currently sitting at a tax rate impact of 8.17% or a tax levy impact of 7%. The additional information that we have is respect to the policing costs. So we received the 2025 OPP policing costs for next year, and it's projected to increase by $268,000, and the impact of that is 1.37%. In addition, proceeding with the 2024 market study, the impact of that is $270,000, and that's a 1.38%. So if I was to recreate this template today, it would not be 8.17%. It would be a starting point of 10.88%. So that would be my request to council, is that understanding what the factors are in terms of our pressures that we're seeing externally, what is the reasonable or maximum rate increase that you would be expecting of staff to come back with for the budget, as well as direction on whether that is to include a 3% asset management plan levy, unlike last year where that was not included. So that's the kind of thing we would be looking for direction on.
Any councillor like to begin the discussion on that one? Oh, come on. Come on. Everybody has to tie their shoe right now, don't they? Councillor Blackwell, how about you start?
Thank you. Through you, I don't think that this will be a surprise coming for me, but I certainly would like us to see us funding our at least 3% annual increase contribution for our AMP. I advocated for it strongly last year. I think it's incredibly important that we start with that as a base.
Do you have a number in your head that where you're comfortable at starting, or maximum number? Give us or if not, you can pass on it and wait till we go around again.
Looking at these figures and the sums that came forward, politically, I'm comfortable with as high as 8%. I'm not sure 100% how we're going to get there, but certainly I wouldn't necessarily want to see it over that.
Councillor Hinchberger, please.
Thank you, through your chair. I have a max increase ceiling of 8% with a target of 7. That's inclusive of the 3% for asset management. I guess a lot comes down to trying to gauge, based on very little public input, what the appetite is for maintaining everything no matter how high it goes. And we all, I think, have very different opinions about what we think the appetite in the community is for that. But yeah, eight max, stretch target of 7.
Anyone else? Counselor Stewart, please.
It wouldn't be tax time unless Counselor Stewart talks about something. Through you, Chair, I would recommend anywhere from a 6 to 8% target. I think that would be fair. I think the community understands that we're fighting some tough issues, but they're getting to the point that their pocketbooks are getting tight too. So, 6 to 8 would be something that I would be able to agree to. Thank you.
Counselor Stanoff, great.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I'm also aligned with like the 6 to 8% mark. Understanding we'd need to be at 8%. One thing that I would just acknowledge is thank you to the director for providing all the survey data that you did. I went through all the detailed comments, and it doesn't look like there's an appetite to reduce any of the services that we currently have. So based on that feedback, it actually sounded like there was some desire to increase, but I don't know that that's necessarily reflective of everyone. So that would make me comfortable at that 8% to try to maintain what we're doing. I think it's a realistic number. So that's where I'm sitting.
Counselor Kavanaugh.
Thank you very much. And through the chair, I want to echo Councillor Steinhoff-Gray's comments about the survey data. Of all the respondents, it provides a very interesting picture, especially with the fill-in messages as well. It really seems across the board that a lot of people are in favor of maintaining and taking care of what we have. Unfortunately, that is going to cost a significant increase just to make that number work. So if we're throwing numbers on a wall, I don't think anyone would be on board with a double-digit increase if you asked a member of the public to maintain things, but I'm willing to go as high as 9.99.
There were 3 numbers involved in that. Okay. But only one before the decimal. Right on. Councillor Prenger, you haven't had a chance to speak yet.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Well, I too had reviewed the survey data and noticed that same trend that it seemed like there was little appetite for reducing most of our services, at least. I've actually gotten extremely the opposite feedback in person from people, so I struggle to reconcile those two things at the moment. I think that at this point in our term, I'm hoping counselors are a little more comfortable with being a little more assertive and actually looking at our services and trying to figure out how we can be more efficient or effective in order to save some costs so we don't have to reduce the services themselves, but maybe do them more effectively. Not that we do a bad job or staff does a bad job. That's not what I'm saying. There's always room for improvement in anything anyone does, though. So to look for efficiencies so that we can keep our tax rate increase as low as possible is what I'm looking for. And I struggle to go any higher than 7 or 8. That would be scary for me. I mean, I know just like anyone else, single income, it's not easy to have a huge jump. But I also agree that the 3% for asset management fund is very important. I struggled with not putting that in last year, so I think we need to do it. And we just have to get creative this year. Creative in a way that we didn't last year. We were creative last year in a couple of ways, but I think we gotta not repeat those. We did that as a one-time fix. I agree, but creative in other ways. Thanks.
Councillor Blackwell, you had a question?
Yes, thank you. My question was, through you, was just related to when we may get updates. I was just briefly looking at the kind of summary sheet we had at the beginning of the 2024 budget. And one of the very favorable variables perhaps was the property tax or assessment growth. Do you know when we find that out and what the impact may be considering the amount of building that we've been having lately?
So through you, so that's actually one of the last things that is finalized when we get the final tax roll, and it's usually the end of the first week of December. So because we're trying to have the first budget meeting a little bit earlier this year, I don't even know if I'll have that by the time the presentation is put together. I might have that as a speaking point, but it may not be reflected in the documents.
Okay, so just from the comments that have been made round the table, I would provide direction. I would offer the direction to our Director of Corporate Services that the maximum 2025 property tax rate increase inclusive of the annual asset management funding requirement. I'm gonna put the number 8 on it. I've heard 6 to 8, I've heard 9.99, but broadly speaking, the number 6 to 8. So you can say that, but I'm gonna guess that the number is gonna be 8. If you provide that range, the number is gonna end up at 8. We're gonna look at the assessment growth, which will have an effect on the tax rate. The next item is the service level reductions or expansions. So there's that sleeve that's going to slide a little bit. Is council comfortable offering a number of 8% for the tax rate? 7 to 8%. Okay. 7.99. Okay. Is council, I did not say in any way that that is the final tax rate. I'm saying that's the direction that we're giving staff to create the draft budget in the 8% range. Councillor Steinoff, Gray, please.
Thank you through you, Chair. I'm quite comfortable with that as being our direction to staff. I would be comfortable putting that forward as a number. The only thing I would ask is if there's an opportunity, if we could, I don't know whether it's a point where we have to provide direction to staff, but I do think as a group, we should be discussing some of the comments where they took the time to put comments into the survey. I categorized them. I made categories and chunked them together so that I could look at them holistically based on the themes that were emerging. And I do think that in preparation for our budget deliberations and that final number that we end up with, we need to look at those concerns and considerations.
Is that the sort of thing through our CAO, is that the sort of thing that the councillor could provide her spreadsheet or however you chunk them together? No, it's likely, it's likely far more sophisticated than that. I'm sorry. That's my latest computer update. My Commodore 64 got to a spreadsheet and I'm so excited. But if you could, no, seriously, if you could provide that to the CAO, and if we could categorize, I could get it to ping, but it would never pong back. It was awful. If we could get those comments to be included as part of the budget discussion. Okay, is that, so just consensus that we're heading for the 7 to 8% range. We good with that? If so, it's not a motion, it's just consensus. I just want to see your hands. Okay. Further, the last part of this is the council directs staff on any proposed service level reductions or expansions. So if there are any service level expansions or contractions that you are thinking about at this point, this is opportunity to raise them. One must be slightly sensitive what you talk about when you're saying we're going to get rid of this or that or something else. But there are opportunities between now and our next budget meeting whereby the director says, oh, somebody has seen this as an area of efficiency improvement or a service reduction, or our community maybe needs to spend a little bit this year so that next year we get way more back or something like that. So I'm offering you opportunity to present service level changes now, or there must be a manner in which they can do that subsequent to this meeting before our next one, because sometimes there needs to be a seed planted and it doesn't grow until we get into the discussion. Counselor Hinchberger, please.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I had two. I would have called them more adjustments, and I can submit them separately. One of them was to alter the hours of operation at the Kincardine Waste Management Center on one day a week in the summertime to shift it later, say from 12 to 6 or 12 to 7, to provide a better level of service for people who work the traditional Monday to Friday 9 to 5 jobs. That was one. I can wait my turn for the, or give the next one right now. The other is I'd like to understand what's required to what I think would improve the efficiency of our seasonal bylaw enforcement by mobilizing them on bikes and to look at the way we deploy them. The majority of the observations I've had from people throughout the year and myself is they tend to do whatever they do in pairs. And I would just like to know what are the hurdles that would be necessary in order to, say, implement a couple of the things I described. Transportation to make them more efficient and have them work more independently of each other. That's it. That's mine.
And it was a suggestion that like ultimately didn't end up with a lot more savings or anything, but there were hours of operation for our cemetery crew that, you know, it doesn't make a big difference as far as dollars and cents, but it makes a big difference as far as quality of work shifts, you know. So there's, it doesn't always have to be dollars and cents if there is an improvement in working conditions or whatever. Those are all good things. So we have, short of any other service level comments, we have another one, Councillor Stanoff-Gray, please.
Thank you. Just one thing for consideration when we talk about waste management, because I know that a number of questions have been asked, and I don't want to negatively impact our attempts to keep a reasonable increase to our budget. So in clarifying that, I continue to get questions about the Ward 3 dump. And I know that was one of the few places where you could drop off brush for free previous to. So in addition to the hours of operation, I think one of the things I would like to look at is how, whether or not there's flexibility in the hours of operation in which facilities we're at and when, and if that impacts us, that's fine. I'd like to understand it and consider it previous to our budget discussions, just so that we have that on the table. And one of the major themes that's come up even on social media, and we all know I try to stay off social media, but the Reuse It Center, a lot of folks did actually use that and they missed the service that it provided for them to get materials. And so if there was a creative way to not lose control of that center where we have garbage being dumped as opposed to properly managed, but had the good items that folks could leverage that need it in the community, I'd like to consider it as part of the budget is all.
Deputy Mayor, please.
I'm actually wondering if it's going to be perhaps more efficient and effective for us to do this in writing prior to the next meeting. Is that going to be the preference that we just sort of perhaps send our suggestions prior to the next meeting?
I appreciate that suggestion, but there is real value, I believe, in, like, there are some things, we're gonna talk about the landfill, we're gonna talk about hours of operation, we're gonna talk about efficiency. There's, I do not disagree with submitting them in writing, but and maybe you should, just to make sure that the director gets the intent of what you were talking about. But there is real value in speaking out the changes that we might be thinking about. So I think it's a both and, if I might be so bold as to suggest that, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Stewart, you had your hand up, please.
Thank you very much. For you, Chair, we're going to talk about the other two items that are attachment, the legacy fund and the full-time summary. I know it's not part of the exact motion or the direction, but they are sort of important.
They are important, I concur, but honestly, they are not part of this motion. So yes, we will talk about them, but it's not going to be tonight on this. Councillor Stanoff-Gray, please.
Thank you, through you, Chair. And this would be for our Director of Parks and Recreation behind me. Community Services, sorry. Thank you, Councillor Hinchberger. One of the other themes that came out in my bidding activity, some folks, again, this isn't my own research, but I think it's something we should look at. They had acknowledged that we had 35 parks and 21 playgrounds, and I have not confirmed this information. This was survey respondents. But one of the things they talked about is there a way to reconcile some of our parks so that we are putting really targeted focus area on what we're doing in specific locations as opposed to trying to really overstretch ourselves with sprawl. I don't know the answer to that question. It might be that we want to maintain all 35 and 21. But I would be curious for staff's opinion on that, because one of the themes that seems to be coming out is what can we reconcile so that we get the service we want without overextending ourselves. And that theme seems to be something that goes through all the different areas that we're looking at. So I think it's something we have to look at. And even when we talk about like washroom maintenance and the different things there, one of the things we talked about in our strategic meeting that I again think we need to look at is what cost we've had through vandalism and other situations, because we have been too pulled, I'm going to say, too pulled to actually get our eyes on what we need to get our eyes on necessarily. So I would really appreciate the staff's thoughts on the cost of our lack of presence, to understand whether increasing some services may decrease costs unintended through rectifying those situations. So that is a lens I would like to see on that budget, if that's possible.
Kind of an efficiency thing. Deputy Mayor Reid, did you have another comment?
I could comment. I think one of my things will be in relation to the accessibility. I know that we were provided some funding to go through the catalog of issues, and we are currently, as the accessibility committee, looking at updating that catalog of issues and getting some work done. I know that the last budget, we were looking very much through a lens of accessibility. So I think for me, that will be certainly where one of my focuses is this budget.
So we have the motion before us. We've gone through the item by item. I believe we've reached consensus. So we have a mover and seconder that we received the budget for information, or the report for information. We approve the 2025 wage increase using the July CPI of 2.5%. We've provided direction on the maximum 2025 property tax rate increase, inclusive of the asset management funding. And we have directed staff on any proposed service level reductions. And we've also provided an option to provide any subsequent ones in writing or conversation if that is your choice. All in favor of the motion? Anyone opposed? That's carried. Well done. 2025 consolidated rates and fees. We need a mover and seconder that the council approve the proposed 2025 consolidated rates and fee schedule as outlined in staff report Financial Services 2024-20, effective January 1, 2025. Moved and seconded by Councillor Hinchberger and Councillor Kavanaugh. Director, would you like to speak to this or just wait for questions?
Through you, we'll wait for questions.
Any questions? Councillor Stewart, please.
Thank you. It's quite a list. It's quite a list. I think we need to make sure that the public realizes those sewer rates are going to go up 8.8%. And the water rates will be increasing 6.9. So that's a fairly hefty increase. Well, I'm not saying it's not required. It's probably more than required, but it also needs to be taken out of this report and make sure the public understands that before they get their first invoice. Thank you very much for the recreational burn permit. I don't quite understand. It used to be $20.66. It's now just $20. Thank you very much, saving myself 66 cents. And I just have a general question. When we're looking at sewer rates and sewer lagoons and Tiverton and everything, and this is just a general question, does Bruce Power OPG, or do they actually pay us sewer rates at that lagoon? You might not be able to answer it. It might be a Mark question. Thank you.
For you, if you're speaking about the Bruce Energy Center customers, yes, we do have rates and fees that we do collect from the customers there.
Actually, I'm asking about the big power plant. Do they pay rates or do they use our lagoon?
No.
Oh. So we do have our Manager of Environmental Services, Mark O'Leary, online, if there's any questions for him, but other than that, we have the motion on the floor. All in favor? Anyone opposed? That's carried. Debenture for Kincardine Business Parklands at Highway 921. We need a mover and seconder that council direct staff to finalize the debenture documentation in the amount of $2,626,000 over a 5-year term for the servicing costs for Highway 921 Business Park to convert the floating rate capital loan through OILC to a debenture. Moved by councillors Inchberger and Kavanaugh. Director, do you want to just give us a broad overview of what we're doing? It's my understanding we're just completing direction that we had given staff previously, that we were going to move ahead with this, and you had informed us this was the process and the direction. Okay, well, that's another way of putting it. So are there any questions regarding this motion? Councillor Hinchberger, please.
A couple. I was having a discussion with Councillor Blackwell about this before the meeting, just a couple check. Were there options other than the 5-year term? And if there were, what was the thought process behind that? And the other is there any opportunity if development occurs and we get those funds to pay off the debenture earlier? Or are we constrained to the full life of it?
Through you. That's a good question. So that the fact that we actually cannot pay it down early is the reason why the staff recommendation is a 5-year term. So if we did anything further, like greater than that, 10 years, 20 years, then we'd be forced to pay that for the full term or incur a significant penalty. So that's the thought process behind the short 5-year term.
Councillor Blackwell, you had a question?
Thank you. That was my question.
Councillor Stewart?
Thank you very much. And through you, Chair, I don't know what the feeling of the council is. These things are basically, the interest over 5 years is $250,000 that comes out of basically taxpayers. And we're a little premature because we really haven't talked about Bruce Telecom proceeds. And I think that, it's unfortunate because the timing's not correct. Basically, you have to have this thing wrapped up. Probably the interest rate will come down a bit because there's another Canada thing on the 28th of October and interest rates are going south. The only problem is that we really need as a council to really figure out what we're going to do with the Bruce Telecom proceeds. We could have lent them the money and we could actually take that interest back into our Bruce Telecom legacy fund. So, it is some consideration because, as you're well aware with the proceeds, and you did a great job on the other one showing all the proceeds and where they are, interest rates are going down. So, we have $28 million that probably down the road will be making 2 or 3%. Maybe it's time we sort of look at it, especially during our time when we're going to look at the legacy, that we might start lending money to ourselves, but paying back interest at a fair interest rate plus the principal, instead of just leaving that money in the bank. Because right now we're borrowing it from somebody and giving them the proceeds. And then, I'm not sure if that really makes sense long term. Thank you.
Director, please.
So through you, so council passed the bylaw for the Bruce Telecom Legacy Fund policy. One of the guiding principles of that policy is to ensure the preservation of capital. So depleting or withdrawing significant amount of funds would not be in alignment with that policy. So therefore, that would require a complete revision and redo of the policy prior to the end of the term of the loan, which is December. So council would have to make that decision quickly. With respect to the comment about that there is uncertainty with what to do with the Bruce Telecom funds, that is all documented in the policy, and it's clear about what the interest earnings can be used for. in terms of the timing as well, and it's to fund a major capital project, and it's supposed to be decided upon during the annual budget process. So with the first withdrawal, that won't be able to be made until later on next year. And there's even an amount set out. So I guess staff is somewhat confused about why there's confusion about the fact that we haven't talked about the policy. So that's staff's perspective.
Councillor Steinhoff, Gray, please.
Thank you, through you, Chair. And just a clarification to the previous report you provided, the 2025 budget plan report. I thought I read a line in there somewhere saying that we wouldn't be able to do anything with the fund until the 3rd of May, 2025 anyways. Because you would need to wait a year after the initial capital transfer. So I'm clarifying that because that is another argument as to why we wouldn't be able to do this, what's being suggested.
Through you, that's correct. And we're still following the first year phase-in period. So we're gradually making those transfers into the one investment fund as was stipulated under the policy. So to make changes now would be a significant deviation from what was approved by council.
Councillor Hinchberger, you had your hand up there, please.
Thank you. I think what I heard though, as far as touching the capital of Bruce Telecom, the perspective was that this would be an investment. Not that, whereas we have the capital invested in a certain asset mix, it wouldn't be taking the capital from it to do this. It would be part of your investment portfolio, would actually be a loan to yourself, if I understand it correctly.
Through you, I'm not sure how you would do that without withdrawing money. Like, unless council's proposing to use the interest earnings to pay for the annual payments.
If I may, I think rather than solely investing the money in one investments, which is the brand name, I think Councillor Hinchberger, correct me if I'm wrong, was suggesting that it might be appropriate, and I think Councillor Stewart's comment was something the same, was that part of the investment, rather than gold or buildings or something, part of the investment is infrastructure. So part of your, was that the suggestion that you're?
Well, that's it. I think that's trying to clarify.
Yeah. So, having said that, I'm going to just refer back to our policy again, which does not provide us the opportunity to make any withdrawals of any sort from the Bruce Telecom Legacy Fund until May of next year. Is that what? Can you clarify that for me, Director, please?
So that would be for the interest earnings.
For the interest earnings.
But the policy is specific in terms of the legacy fund investment asset mix. And it clearly states, ultimately, at the end of the transition period, 0 in cash, 5% maximum. It's specific with one investment Canadian equity portfolio. There's targets, as well as the fixed income, one Canadian corporate bonds and government bonds. So everything is as per what was approved in the policy. So if council wishes to deviate from the policy, that's something that council can do. It's just not a recommendation of staff.
So the policy precludes investment in things other than what's stated in the policy, which is through one investment. It doesn't allow us to make investments using the principal in infrastructure or trucks or stuff like that, or loans.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. And through you, Chair, it's interesting because we're sort of talking about the policy over here. We are the policy. We make policy. We can actually change policy with a vote of, I guess, the 5 of us. It is a thought, I know that, when we first got the funds, we needed to put them away and really sort of think about it. And that's part of the whole thing I brought up tonight. We need to really start to think about this. If we're loaning $8 million from somebody, we're paying somebody $500,000 a year in interest. Why shouldn't we be paying ourselves and not depleting our principal, we still have the principal because we have to still pay back the interest plus the principal to the fund. And so, I think it'd be, we're sitting here with $28 million and we're going to go out and borrow some money from an outside company and pay them the interest. Maybe we can't do it now, but we really have to think about that and maybe start to restructure our policy to allow this kind of activity to take place. Because I don't want to see us borrowing money from outside when we could borrow from inside and still maintain our policy of keeping the principal. Thank you.
Counselor Stanoff Gray, please.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I'd just like to clarify a question, because I think with the direction this has taken, I think it's worth asking. Have we already invested some of those funds? Because there could be penalties from backing away from that too. So I'm just curious, based on, I know you outlined what we're allowed to invest in through the policy. Have we made any investments to current date? Because I don't want to revert ourselves if we have a term.
So through you, so yes, so there is a schedule attached to the budget plan report. That's the schedule of the legacy fund holdings as of August 30th. And there are some GICs that have been invested into, as well as 1 Canadian government bonds and corporate bonds and Canadian equities as per the transition policy. There is also cash available because that cash is being gradually transferred over into the one investment fund.
Follow up, please. Follow up, please, Counselor Stanoff Gray.
Yeah, of those GICs and government bonds that we've invested in, is there a term associated?
Through you. So no, there's some suggested terms of how long you should be holding on to those in order to see the benefit of growth. Some of them are between 18 months and 3 years. Some are 4+ years, and some are even longer term than that. And we do have GICs currently that are 2 years, some are 12 months, some are 18 months. So they're staggered so that they all don't mature at the same time.
Counselor Stewart, please.
Just to clarify and to help everyone out, if you take a look at the proceeds, the initial investment, we have a CIBC high interest savings account, which is basically cash, and it's 13.5 million. Thank you.
Okay, so I appreciate that council looked at the value of stability when we invested these funds. There was a specific plan moving forward. I would encourage you to maintain that stability, even on the short term. It's not that I disagree with the concept of internal borrowing. That's not what I'm saying. But this legacy fund is there for a reason, to provide stability for a long time. And I'm just going to ask for council vote on this. Councillor Prenger, go ahead. Yeah, you haven't spoken to it.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I actually agree with Councillor Stewart on this one.
Thanks.
And anyone can correct me, I don't want to speak for the other councillors, but I know when this policy came about, it sort of felt, at least to me, that we were under a bit of a time crunch. We had to decide what to do with it. And none of us are investment bankers or investment professionals. So, and what our director recommended for how we write this policy and what we invest in made complete sense to me at the time. It seemed very reasonable. This opportunity was not present at the time, or this need wasn't present at the time, so it wasn't considered. And I agree that as council, we are the policy makers, and we do have the capability of changing our policies if we see that there could be a benefit to doing so. I think in this instance, we actually have an opportunity here, and it's something we should consider.
Councillor Hinchberger, please.
Tried my best to rapidly pull up the Bruce Telecom Legacy Fund. There's a section in Municipal Investment Framework. A municipality may invest its funds in accordance with OREG 43897, which outlines a fairly limited set of conservative investment instruments that it can do. I guess a pertinent question would be where this line of thought is going, would that be in compliance or not in compliance with the reg? Because if it's not, it's a moot point. We couldn't do it anyways.
For you, so it's independent of the regulation. It's not an investment, it's a loan to ourselves. So we're just borrowing internally. So it's outside of that regulation.
So they wouldn't get, as far as the government is concerned with the regulation, they wouldn't consider this an investment. Thanks.
Okay, so we have motion that council direct staff to finalize the debenture documentation in the amount of $2,626,000 over a 5-year term for the 9 and 21 business park to convert the floating rate to a debenture. It was moved by, I'm sorry. Councilors Hinchberger and Kavanaugh, all in favor? Opposed? And that carried. Revisions to policy PD 1.2, plans of subdivision development. We need a mover and seconder that council adopt the policy number DEV 02, complete with Appendix A being the subdivision agreement, and Appendix B, municipal development and servicing guidelines, moved by councilors Hinchberger and Clark, Deputy Mayor Clark. Any discussion? Councillor Blackwell, please.
Thank you. Through you, I appreciate the reference to the cycling master plan, but I had maybe 2 questions. First was around our official plan asking for sidewalks on both sides of collector roads, and wondering whether that's been included within these recommendations. And the other is whether there's any kind of reference to trail connections for new subdivisions.
I see our Director of Infrastructure and Development online here. Good evening, Director. Would you like to comment on that, please?
Thank you, through you, Mayor Craig. So the first element in relation to where we're installing sidewalks, unfortunately, without having the opportunity to look at kind of both of those in advance of this meeting, I can't say confidently, but what I can tell you is that the approach generally is that, we're only putting sidewalks on both sides in appropriate locations. But again, I'd have to refer back to the other documents and just not prepared to comment on that here this evening. The second, sorry, Councillor Blackwell, can you state what the second was again?
Yeah, sorry. Thanks. It was about trail connections, and whether that's been incorporated at all into the recommendations.
Yeah, thank you very much. And through you, Mayor Craig. The second component, historically, we did not have, a lot associated with trails in terms of what we would look at in guidelines and even, subdivision agreements. So over the last 5-6 years, we've started really incorporating trails and establishing what the criteria is in terms of, usage for materials and connectivity and everything. So there is some detail in there, but I'm not certain if it's, if it's sufficient to what you may be looking for, but there is some reference in the guideline.
So we all received the report. Seeing no more questions, we have mover and seconder, the council adopt policy complete with Appendix A being the subdivision agreement and municipal development and servicing guidelines. All in favor? Anyone opposed? That carried. Sludge removal, environmental services 2024-27. We need a mover and seconder that council approve a 2024 budget amendment to accelerate a project for sludge removal from both the Tiverton or the Kincardine and Tiverton Lagoon sites at a cost of $680,000 funded from the Sewer Reserve Fund 67. Moved by Councillor Kavanaugh and Steinhoff Gray. Discussion? Councillor Hinchberger, please.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. It strikes me as maybe it's a coincidence that both the Kincardine wastewater treatment plant and the Bruce Energy Center wastewater treatment plant that were built at very different times and are about 20 kilometers apart seem to be having a a degrading trend in total suspended solids over 2024. And other than like capital changes that might be playing a role here, have there been any changes in operating practices at those two plants in this year? That's my first question.
Good evening, through you, Mayor Craig. There hasn't been any significant changes, Councillor Hinchberger, to the overall, I guess, process. We'll start with the Kincardine site. As many of you are aware, there was an aeration upgrade done there in 2022. That project has not yielded the results that we're hoping for. And the majority of the problem with that project right now is the new aeration system that we have installed is actually, I would say, somewhat plugged or isn't running as efficiently as we'd like it to produce the dissolved oxygen that we need through the treatment process. When I say plugged, that would be a combination of solids like sludge, but it is also plugged with a combination of regs and things that are not deteriorating in our cells, which are now kind of somewhat covering our aerators, and in particular the fine bubble component of those aerators. At the BEC site, we haven't had any significant changes at all. As far as overall operations, we have made some tweaks at both sites to chemical dosing. We've also worked at the Tiverton site to ensure compliance through the business park. So early in the spring, we did chase down some samples from some of our sources in the business park, and some of those weren't in compliance with what our sewer bylaw is. So we did some PR in those sites to both hand out the bylaw and then ensure compliance. And we have continued to sample some of those sites to ensure that results have gotten better and they have improved throughout the year.
Thank you. My second question is more about, I read the environmental compliance approval for the Bruce Energy Center wastewater treatment plant. And there's generally the distinction between effluent objectives and effluent limits or requirements. And we look like we're outside of the effluent limits or requirements, which gets us into things which can be like are legally enforceable. So my question is, like, under the Environmental Protection Act, there is the concept of environmental penalties, and there's an environmental penalties regulation. I guess my question generally is are municipal facilities like this still subject to the potential for environmental penalties, or are we exempt?
Through you, Mayor Craig. So the municipality is not exempt from those types of penalties. As you're aware through the compliance report, and there's one coming again later, that on a monthly basis, we report these to the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks. We have a site-specific inspector for those sites. So he is personally emailed each month that we remain out of compliance. So we're not immune to the fines. However, the ministry is more likely to look at what the municipality is doing as far as a proactive approach. A project like this where we're looking to be proactive and start to deal with some of these issues. In my experience, the ministry is very receptive of those and provide some leniency. But if we were to choose to do nothing and just remain out of compliance, they're more likely to implement orders to get these things in compliance as opposed to fines.
Councillor Stanoff Gray, please.
Through you, Chair. Just kind of building off of the questions of Councillor Stewart. One of the things that I noticed was obviously August, we were significantly over for Kincardine, 52.5 mg per liter, and then September up to 68. We seem to be inclining, and we're already exceeding what we're allowed for suspended solids. So I guess my question is, I don't see a date for when this work's happening in 2025. And is there a plan to try to pull it forward? Because if anything, we've had relatively stable numbers until we didn't. So we were always well under our exceedance. Like when you look back at 2023, it's very it's very level. Like the numbers are very, there's no real movement up or down. It's very stable state. And now we have this inclining trend. So I guess my question is, how far can we incline before we have to ramp up the work? Because I'm not confident that it would be unlikely that we're not going to have another increase when we do our samples for the next month based on what's happening. So I see this activity as must do to course correct, but is there a situation where we might need to try to bring this work forward? And will the weather will the weather impact us for getting this done? Because we're going into winter. I would like to understand the time frame because I didn't see dates.
Sure. And through you, Mayor Craig. So the reason that we've brought the report forward tonight is to try to accelerate this. We're hoping to procure the project, which I would say is going to take a bit of time here, and Mother Nature does play an impact on wastewater sites. So the likelihood of getting this project completed in 2024 or even through the winter months just isn't going to happen. So the idea here is that accelerating the project would get us first in the queue and be ready to go for 2025. My expectation would be, because of the new aeration cell in Kincardine, it should produce enough air through the winter to keep that pond open so it doesn't freeze over. The projection to get the sludge out of that pond would be about 3 weeks. I would hope we could be in there like April 1st. And out of there by mid to late April. And then at that point, we would hope that the BEC ponds had opened up and that we didn't have ice there, that we would go directly to the BEC site. Based on the sludge there, I think that project was going to be closer to a month, if not 5 weeks, to complete all the works up there as well. So the goal would be to have these projects wrapped up by the end of May. We've already been in contact with the ministry to inform them that these projects are on the radar for us. The reason for the information is because quite often when you do these projects, your results actually get stirred up. So we're working to produce some contingency plans to do everything we can. But yeah, we're looking hopefully to be completed by the end of May next year, which somewhat aligns with when we really started to experience odor issues in Kincardine this year.
Councillor Stewart, please.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I'm sort of laughing. For the 7 years I've been on council, I don't think I've talked so much about lagoons in my life, and I'm learning much more than I really need to learn. But Mark, you're doing a good job. The only problem I'm having is it doesn't sound like we maybe should have noticed this a little earlier, but how many times do we have to take the sludge out of these lagoons? I mean, is it a yearly thing or is it every 5 years? Because you mentioned in your executive summary, you asked if anyone wanted it and nobody wants it. So I'm not sure where you're going to put it, but it seems to be an ongoing problem, and we've invested quite a bit in some of these lagoons. Do you think once we get the sludge out, some of those apparatuses will work a little bit? We got infrared, we have this, we have that. Help me out with a sort of a future, what you're predicting. Thank you.
Sure. And through you, Mayor Craig. So, Councillor Stewart, the tendency for this type of work used to be land application. So very similar to agricultural practices. But those practices, for the amount of sludge we have, and are just not practical. I wouldn't even want to guess what we would need for acreage, but if I were to guess, I would guess somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 acres is what would be needed for what we have in all these ponds. In a past life, I've had great success with a technology called geotubes. And what the geotubes do is you pump your sludge into hard woven bags that dewater. So the water actually goes back to the ponds, and then you collect the solids in the bags. So I'm sure you guys can all envision this, but when you flush the toilet, there's a lot of water goes down the toilet, and there's not a lot of solids. So what we've done is you add the polymer, you capture the solids, you let it dewater, and it works similar to an ice cube that you leave in in your freezer for too long where it shrinks through a cold period, freezes, shrinks. And the idea would then be to move those solids at this point to landfill for cover or for final application for like trying to grow topsoil or something on a capped landfill. It works with great success. And that would probably be the option we would be looking at for procurement here. Long term, I would suggest easily that you would be looking at an additional, I would say with ease, 30 to 40 years of probably very little problems in the large ponds in Kincardine. Based on the findings of the small pond in Kincardine, we're projecting that it should probably be cleaned every 10 years. And the BEC site, to our knowledge, has never had any sludge removal taken out of it. But typically, once you do the sludge removal, they come back to a really good, useful life, and then you're just looking at upgrades to your aeration equipment and blowers and things of that nature. But I would suspect once we get these sludge projects done, that we would see improved results and long-term good results.
Thank you, Mark.
So we have a motion on the floor to approve 2024 budget amendment, the amount of 680,000 for sludge removal. All in favor? And that is carried. At this point, I'd like to recuse myself from the chairs regarding this next notice of motion prior to the meeting. And Deputy Mayor is going to run the meeting.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so we have a motion. Whereas Section 217(1) of the Municipal Act 2001 authorizes a local municipality to change the composition of its council, and whereas a consultant could provide unbiased options for changes to the council composition, and whereas a consultant could provide options that ensure legal principles are being followed, and whereas a consultant can host community conversations, including public open houses and workshops, and now therefore be it resolved that council include in the 2025 budget deliberations $12,000 for hiring a consultant to review and provide recommendations specifically on the number of members which would comprise the council of the Corporation of the Municipality of Kincardine following the 2026 election, moved by Mayor Kenneth Craig and seconded by Councillor Kavanaugh. Any discussion? Mayor Craig.
Through you, Deputy Mayor. There are three main reasons for this motion, with the ultimate intention of reducing the number of councillors elected in the 2026 election and beyond. The first is government efficiency. It's just a empirical sort of thing that 7 councillors reduces staff time communicating with council, resourcing council, information packages, preparations, all those sorts of things. The intent of this motion, second reason, maintains the ward system, but it still provides broad representation throughout the municipality. And the third reason that I'd like to highlight is the fiscal responsibility. Our budget includes plus minus $40,000 per councillor per year. You would drop at least to your $80,000 reduction, depending on what the recommendation comes back from the consultant. Your return on investment is 3 months, 2 months. You don't get it till the next year, but it's an ongoing saving. So those are the three main reasons why I would suggest this is a good efficiency move for our municipality.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, and through you, Deputy Mayor. So basically, the ward system would have to maintain, because you wanted to change the ward system. That's a huge procedure, and that's got to go to the government. And I believe the last one had to go to the, I think, I forgot where it went to, but it had, the government approved it. So I think the tribunal approved it too. So we had to do that. So what you're looking at is maybe reducing by 2, and that would be basically reducing at large. So you'd only have basically 1 at large, and then we would have the deputy mayor position and the mayor position. That's interesting. Okay, I just wanted to know, because that's what you're really hiring a consultant. And does the consultant really need to be hired or is the consultant really here to discuss it with the public? Is that the problem, that we need the public input, or do we do it ourselves?
Mayor Craig.
We have options with that. Councillor Stewart, our CAO, has informed us that this decision, strictly limited to reducing the numbers, is a decision that we can make. We don't need to hire a consultant. If there is concern by council, just as we did with other consultants, to provide an unbiased opinion of how this is going to turn out, you hire the consultant to provide the recommendation, and we either agree or disagree with them, and then pick a number anyway. So, but it is like maintain the boards, like there's no change in that. It's just council composition.
Councillor Hinchberger.
Thank you. Through you, temporary chair. A couple questions. Funding source, I'm assuming you're thinking contingency reserve and not adding this to the operating budget. That's one question, even though it's $12,000.
No,
Okay.
operating budget.
Okay. I'm interested in this, but I think I need to stay publicly. I'm not interested in seeing a future that doesn't have a ward system the way it is right now. And then the question is, we spent a lot of time earlier tonight listening and talking about future growth. So if we're going to be, if you do this in 2 terms, you find yourself thinking, geez, 9 would have been a better, extend I can pause. Sorry. Oh, and then it'll be, all right. Just wanted to say, so it was clear that a council decision could reduce the numbers without any consultation required. Can an increase also be done simply by a council decision? Okay, fair enough. Thanks.
Motion to extend, Councillor Kavanaugh.
Till end of business.
Is there a seconder on that? Councillor Blackwell. Can we take a vote on Councillor Kavanaugh's motion to extend till the end of business, seconded by Councillor Blackwell? It's a vote.
Oh, I'm sorry. Here, there.
That passes. Sorry, Councillor Hinchberger, were you finished with your comments? Yeah. Councillor Kavanaugh, for you.
Thank you very much, and through the chair. This is something where it is a sensitive project to a lot of people that maybe isn't even on their radar until you bring it up with them. Looking around, and I see where we're at our discussion with our budget and setting a preliminary number here. I have no doubt in my mind, if we are going to be asking to make cuts or take things away from people within this municipality in an effort to lower the tax rate, we should start by looking at ourselves and looking at the top most level and working downwards. Before you can't ask, I feel bad asking lower in the hierarchy to suddenly make do with less or become more efficient without first looking at council and seeing if we can optimize and be as efficient as we are. To that end, I believe 7 can accomplish the same task as 9. The ward representation remains here. And to your line of thinking, Councillor Stewart, I would suggest that we could even forego the consultant if you aren't a fan of consultants, and simply resolve the issue with a vote tonight.
Councillor Steinhoff-Gray.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I'm going to echo what Councillor Hinchberger said, and that is I would not be willing to entertain changes to the ward system. I think it's important, especially for wards 2 and 3, that there is that voice that doesn't get drowned out. But one of the things I'd be really concerned about with reducing the ward system is I think there's a very unique check, or not ward system, pardon me, the number of counselors is that we all bring a different perspective, especially based on where we were and the campaigns. And I honestly can't imagine where we would have been this year without some of the voices that we had around the table. I also think that we're exaggerating some of the costs. When you look at, I think you're including some of the travel costs, but I think it's really important that people are willing to volunteer their time to go to Roma and go to AMO and go to some of those events where we lobby hard for this municipality. And a lot of hours and time and prep go into that, that I would say is voluntary. And when you think about all the committees that we need to serve and all the changes that are coming at us and the ad hoc commission, like committees that are coming, like people are already feeling stretched with what they're doing. Look at the discussion we had about picking up the committees that our former Councillor Doug Kennedy was covering. People were, until we get an incumbent, I'll do this. It wasn't a, I'll do this retroactively till the end. So I just think we have to be very careful about what we're considering, because unfortunately for us, we are in a position where we have underfunded some of our infrastructure. We are in a position where we have dramatic growth happening in our community, and we need to make sure that we're dealing with it responsibly. So I'm just going to be very clear. This is something I'm not confident is a great idea. I'm willing to consider it if that's what the will of the group is, but it's not something I'm really comfortable with. I think it would be a disservice.
Councillor Pranger.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I tend to just stay quiet when people have already voiced the same thing that I think, but I'm going to start trying to speak up a little bit more. So I too do not support changing the ward system, so I'm glad that's not part of this proposal. I will admit that this is actually one of the first things I considered when I joined council, because part of my, a big part of why I joined council was to look for ways to make improvements and find efficiencies. And this is exactly what I thought of. And then as more time went on, I saw how different everyone's opinion is here and how we all represent a different part of the community. And we all have different experiences and skill sets that contribute dramatically to our decision making. And I totally changed my perspective on it. I actually decided that I thought we would be worse off if we removed anyone from our council that's here. And considering something Councillor Steinhoff-Gray just said it, all the committees that we have, we are all stretched thin, like she said, on all of us are on a few of them each, and trying to spread those out amongst fewer councillors would probably be difficult. So, and with the growth that's supposedly coming to our community, we're going to have to represent even more people. So I've actually done a 180, and I'm not in support of reducing the number of councillors at this time.
Councillor Pranger, yeah.
Thank you. And one thing I forgot to say there was, if we are going to move forward with the whole process, I am not in support of having a consultant. Thank you.
If there's no further discussion, I'm happy to read the motion again. Can you, if it could just be that'd be great, thanks.
So it was moved by Mayor Craig, seconded by Councillor Kavanaugh, whereas Section 217(1) of the Municipal Act 2001 authorizes a local municipality to change the composition of its council, and whereas a consultant could provide unbiased options for changes to council composition, and whereas a consultant could provide options to ensure legal principles are followed, and whereas a consultant could host community conversations, including public open houses and workshops, now therefore be it resolved that council include in the 2025 budget deliberations $12,000 for hiring a consultant to review and provide recommendations specifically on the number of members which would comprise the council of the corporation of the municipality of Kincardine following the 2026 election.
All those in favor? All those against? That failed. I'm against.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Okay, moving on, we have a motion regarding the Whitney Crawford Community Center. Moved by Amanda Steinoff Gray, seconded by Mike Hinchberger. Whereas the Council of the Municipality of Kincardine undertook a community process for the development of a Parks and Recreation Plan in 2023, whereas the plan identified a net increase of 1,400 new residents by 2031, which is an estimated growth of 11.7%, with increasing population and younger citizens. Whereas the community has expressed interest in a redesign and redevelopment of the Whitney Crawford Community Center, and council support was demonstrated through the procurement of engineered drawings and building plans in the previous term of council. Whereas this is a shovel-ready project that would replace 2 facilities within the community of Tiverton, including the existing community center and library. Whereas the existing community center and library facilities in the community of Tiverton have several components which have reached the end of their useful life based on the Municipality of Kincardines Asset Management Plan. Whereas the cost of a redevelopment of a new community center in Tiverton was estimated at $7 million in 2022 and is understood that project estimates will exceed this amount for 2025-2027. And whereas the availability of senior government funding was a consideration for pursuit of a new facility, and whereas the provincial grant for community sport and recreation infrastructure fund is currently available and requires demonstrable support for an eligible project, with all expenses being incurred no later than March 31st, 2027. Now therefore be it resolved that council directs staff to submit the most current plans designed by NA Engineering for the redevelopment of a community center in Tiverton and develop a business case for the project, which includes a new library and a new community hall, to Ontario's Stream 2 of the Community Sport and Recreation Infrastructure Fund prior to the deadline of October 29, 2024. And the council confirmed that if successful in receiving provincial funding to support the redevelopment of a new community center in Tiverton, that the project will take priority over other facilities and recreation capital projects in order to support project completion by March 2027, and that the municipal portion of the cost be funded through debt with financing through the Community Benefit Fund or as per a financing recommendation from staff, and that once the project is completed, the municipality will divest itself of other similar municipal assets. And it was moved by Councillor Steinoff Gray and Councillor Hinchberger. Councillor Steinoff Gray, please.
Thank you, through you, Chair. And before I go through my arguments, I actually want to take this time to really thank the staff and our CAO for all their help as we went through this process, looked at the grants, confirmed through the grant organization what we could and could not apply for. I really do appreciate all of the help that was provided. So I really want to start by thanking staff for their cooperation and my fellow councillors, including Councillor Hinchberger, who has been an unbelievable asset in researching this, as well as everyone else around the table. I know Beth has had many side conversations and Andrea with me over this one. I'm basically naming everyone at the table, so I'll stop now. But I just, there's been a true engagement in this, and I really do appreciate it. There's a number of reasons why I think we really need to move forward with this application. That being obviously the age of the building and the lack of maintenance that we have performed. There's a lot of deficiencies even with our library. It's an aging building. And in the spirit of reconciling different objects so that we can actually make a go of, I'm going to say, plans that make sense. So we've been very knee-jerk in a lot of our actions. This has been a need in the community for quite a while. We're approving a lot of new development in the municipality of Tiverton. You talked about the park at the edge of Tiverton, Councillor Stewart, and the number of affordable houses that could come out of that for folks. We have developments going on through Fast Track and different things that we've approved as a council. We know that that population is going to increase, and we know that we're going to need to deal with these things. And our library really does need some significant work. I know that we helped put a ramp up, but in my humble opinion, it's very hard to get around the aisles in that library. So to me, there's some needs from an accessibility perspective. One of the other things I really wanted to take a moment to talk about was the amount of effort and time that's gone into this. So for me, it's important that we acknowledge what the council previous to us did in trying to prepare the path for this work. So I know that there was a committee previous with Ron Amanto, Joe Cottrell, Randy Rupel, Karen Kiefer, and Jim McTeer. And as part of that, they actually visited 6 different community centers that had been erected, including Broadhagen. If I'm saying that wrong, I apologize to that community. Thank you. Newstead, Godrich, Milverton, Cargill, and Belmore. And as part of that, they toured the locations, but they also talked to the municipal staff and they asked them through the inner workings of a community center, what were the things you would have done differently with your new builds? And what I didn't know at the time was all of those data points that were given to them were put into these plans. So given that this stream requires a shovel-ready project, and I don't believe that we have another shovel-ready project, I really think it's worthwhile for the community that we put them forward and really acknowledge the work that went into this, because it sounds like they did put significant research into it. So with that, I'm going to turn it over for others for comment. But I do think this is an important part of the community. For those of us who are at the Tiverton Fall Fair, you saw how crowded people were in to listen to the music. Unfortunately, I usually miss it because I'm at the horse show. But it's a community that rallies and it's a community that's together. I think all of us got into the spirit with the auction of the pies. I know I came home with a few expensive apple pies and such. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is I think our community needs it. And I think that as we continue to grow, a lot of the growth is going to happen in the Tiverton area. And so why not posture ourselves for the future?
Councillor Hinchberger, please.
Thank you through your chair. Some of my thoughts in this process were one of the draft goals of the strategic plan, which was informed by community engagement, was pursue, or that we're working with, pursue smart growth, maintaining our small town rural character and providing opportunities to live and work in the municipality of Kincardine. We had some presentations earlier tonight, and I think there's a number of us that question whether population projections as they currently exist are accurate. In fact, that they are markedly low. For example, while there's no guarantee that landscape is the best it has ever been from my perspective for a new nuclear build on the Bruce site and everything that comes with it. Development opportunities in this area surrounding us, like Godrich, Walkerton, and Port Elgin, they're slowly being consumed. There's been a lot of frustration at things not coming to Kincardine, and I think if you follow the way that the development of this part of the province occurred in the 1850s and beyond, we were kind of last to the party then as they came up from Godrich up through Walkerton or down through Owen Sound. I think the same thing is going to happen again in the next while. We're going to have growth. If we don't manage the growth properly, we're going to end up with a small city, it'll be Kincardine, a village, and a number of hamlets. And we'll lose that small town rural character that's outlined in the goals. So part of the do this in some ways is to protect the small town rural character of the town of Kincardine by spreading some of the growth elsewhere. The town of Kincardine, it's constrained geographically on the west by the lake, politically to the south by Erin Kinloss, and somewhat commercially to the east of Highway 21 by some previous decisions that have been made. Tiverton, on the other hand, has some flexibility. It's also a primary urban community, although, you know, as far as land use designation, but it's not something that people usually talk about. There is an environmental assessment that's in progress on options to address drinking water needs, which are one of the issues, and there is a wastewater plant down the hill on concession too. So in some ways, it's kind of positioned for growth. One of the takeaways for me from the Parks and Rec study at a high level was, you know, a recommendation to take care of what we have before we build new. But this project might look to some people like a deviation from the recommendation, yet I see it as building replacement as opposed to building new. Lastly, I'll say is that the total annual operating deficit of the facilities that could be divested, following completion of this project is currently $160,000 in 2024. I think this project provides an opportunity to address this as to improve the usage of the adjacent Tiverton Sports Center, which it would complement naturally just by its location.
Further comments, questions? Councillor Blackwell, please.
Thank you, through you. I appreciate all the work that's been put into this. I have well, maybe one question and then some statements. My first question is, in the research being done for this recreation fund, is there a capacity and ability to apply to both the new build and the repair or revitalization stream?
CAO, please.
Sure, through you, Mayor, we are eligible to apply to both streams. Your question with respect to capacity, that may be a bit more nuanced. So I'm not sure I have the answer to share because a lot would depend on the project that would be for a renovation type of for that particular stream. So if it was a significant renovation to an existing facility that we were ready to go with, I think you'd be challenged with our internal capacity to take on both projects if we were to be successful in it and actually be able to meet the deadlines with the grant and or even be able to put out RFPs to get drawings to then undertake construction, et cetera. So I think it would really depend on what the second potential project was.
Follow up?
No, maybe I'll touch base a little bit later about whether there's any potential projects coming forward for us to discuss about the other stream. But one of the things I'll say is that I'm a fairly strong advocate for what I would consider to be complete communities, for walkable communities, for communities that feel like they have an identity, gathering space, communal opportunities. And so, you know, having read the Parks and Rec Master Plan the other day and seeing the recommendation there to not build new until we make some other decisions, I think it is important to recognize that if this project does go ahead, it does impact a lot of other decisions. But I also think there's opportunity to support it for the betterment of the community and also to potentially look at our longer term asset management plan about opportunities to divest from other assets and really focus our attention on potentially our most used or largest population centers and really enhance what they can do.
Councillor Stewart, please.
Thank you. I was actually part of the committee that did this last year, so it's okay, don't worry. Just wanted to talk to you about this motion is good. It's too long. I mean, one of the problems is I can't get around this last, you know, like, we're gonna go for funding. The one thing about going for funding on the Stream 2 is because we're less than 20,000, we can go up to 70%. So the biggest thing I'm sort of looking at is NA Engineering, please give us a most current cost estimate ASAP, because if it's 10,000, then we can go up to 7 million. You know, if we put in something like this, because I'm surprised that we did it in 22. I thought it was like 20. But anyways, 7 million only gives us X amount, like 5 million. So I don't know if we have time, but NA Engineering has all the diagrams and everything. So let's do that, because I look at it this way. It's the only shovel-ready project we have. Why look the gift horse in the mouth? Throw it in there and see what happens. The funding on the other side, let's wait until we see what happens. Whether we divest a lot of municipal assets, let's wait and see what happens. But let's put our best position forward to try to get the maximum funding we can get for this project. And then we might have a problem because we have all this money. Thank you.
Councillor Hinchberger, please.
Thank you. I neglected to add, this is, most of us know this around the table, but for those who might be listening or watching, this is a bit of a stretch and a reach, because the fund is to repair, upgrade, or build sport and recreation facilities. And the community center isn't, you know, as front and center in terms of one of those is like a new arena or a ballpark. So we have to realize that. Funding wise, just ballpark, you know, it was 7 million in 2022. If you look at the change in the construction price index over the last couple of years, we might be looking, I wouldn't be surprised by 9. Yeah, so that's my last comment.
Councillor Stewart, please.
To fill in, yeah, unfortunately, the funding in this one particular Stream 2 is 200 million. So it's gonna go fast and, they'll probably bring more funding in down the road, but we gotta get the project in. We gotta see how lucky we are and roll the dice and, I can support that. Thanks.
Counselor Blackwell, please.
Sorry, thank you. Just on that note, when I asked earlier about the capacity for the two projects, one of the questions there was also about capacity of writing two potential grants. Do we have a potential project lined up for the other stream, which we may be more successful within because it's a much smaller amount that we'd be asking for comparison to this project?
So I hear what you're saying, but it's not this motion.
I guess it's more
If
related.
you can connect it to
Yeah.
this motion, that's okay, but just.
So I
do we have
guess my
capacity for another grant writing, that's not this motion at all.
part of my question is, if we know that this application is potentially a reach, my question is to make sure that we also have the capacity to apply for the other fund at the same time, because I would be concerned that if we know that this one's a bit of a Hail Mary, and we go for it, but we potentially miss out on a more reasonable, more likely project that we would be approved for. That said, I still am in support of it. That was just my question, was about, I don't want to miss out on something else as well.
CAO, please.
Yep, through you. Staff certainly have been engaged in community services and following and understanding what potential projects within the stream that you're speaking about are available. I think part of the challenge that we find ourselves in is we have gone through a recreation and parks plan exercise, and part of the findings of that is you need to spend some more specific time and energy focused on your two existing larger sports recreation complexes to figure out exactly which one to do, because there's some significant decisions that need to be made given how challenged those two sites are for the existing infrastructure, which makes up components of both of those buildings. So we do expect to have a staff report, or that has been the plan, is to have a staff report with respect to, I can say, will be Tiverton Sports Arena. We're just not in a spot to be able to say, this is exactly the plan that council has already authorized following that recreation plan that was just developed. So it's just not perfect timing for us in terms of what it is that our planning process aligns with the funding opportunity. I would hope that there might be funds available from senior government in the future. We are across the province seeing recreation facilities that are coming to the end of their useful life because many of them were built 50 years ago. Yeah, Ontario funds and other funds that were available. So it's certainly a need in the community, and your best effort is to try to get plans in place so that you are ready to move on those when they do become available. And I think I appreciate staff and I appreciate councils and the community's input to getting us part of the way there. We're just not all of the way there. So it's a bit of I would expect the report is going to speak to some of the pieces we expect to fail in the not too distant future, and just here's the potential ask for some renovation to that facility to try to make improvements to keep it open.
Councillor Stewart, please.
Thank you. And just to mention, you have Stream 2, which are big projects. Stream 1's like $150 to $1 million. They're little projects. And I believe that without giving something away, I think our staff has a project that they were thinking of submitting under Stream 1. So, those are very small projects. I understand where the CEO is coming from because we have 3 major buildings. One of them could be this community center. The other one's the sport complex. And the other one is the Davidson Center. And, looking at these projects, big talks, but let's get back into this one because we have to prove this one tonight, one way or the other. Thanks.
So I'm, broadly speaking, I too am it's a wasted opportunity if we don't apply for provincial money. I think, unless I'm mistaken, that the timelines to put this whole thing together and be done by March 2027 would be a tight timeline. Would that be accurate? Okay, and what happens to the funding if we're not done in time? Not that I don't think we shouldn't apply. That's not what I'm saying, but there's unintended consequences. Do we lose the funding if we're not done in time? Or a portion of it? Do we know what the stipulations are? Yes, go ahead.
Sure. Well, so if we were to receive the funding, generally funding application, or generally the agreements come through and it spells out what the requirements are. There may be opportunities for exceptions, but it isn't going to be an exception that's allowed because we weren't ready to do the project. It would have to be based on something that happens in the process of us moving the project forward. So yes, it would be tight timelines. There are drawings available. So I would imagine it would be issuing a procurement document where you are if you were successful, you are immediately taking action to issue a procurement document that is looking for a respondent to build and project manage. But again, I would point to, and I appreciate this being included in the motion, it is going to need to take precedent over other recreation capital projects, because it will require even our resources to ensure we are on top of it in order to deal with even a project manager. So that's why I do appreciate that that's in the motion.
Just a minute. The requirements for county libraries for small towns is 2,500 square feet, which is 2.5 times bigger than the one that's there. Just for guidelines, that's what the director of libraries said in her conversation the other day. It's like, that's where we're at. And I do appreciate the acknowledgement about what will happen. Like, it is an aggressive approach to divesting municipal assets that can be fulfilled by the construction of a new place. It is buildings that are sacred to us that we will look at and say, no, we can't do that anymore because we've got our money invested in that one. And like, I appreciate your acknowledgement of that. So like, don't be surprised if you hear your alma mater being destroyed of some sort or other. Okay. Final comment, Councillor Stewart.
Yes, I was sort of fortunate to be on the Zoom meeting when they actually launched this and everything. And it was quite interesting because when you go in with a project, they're going to allow multiple modifications to the design. I mean, they're very loosey-goosey about it, that if you submit something, you're getting the grant money, and then you can modify it accordingly. And it really was. And people were asking questions and people going, really? You could end up with a sports arena. I don't know. But what I'm saying is it's not so tight. So there is a little bit of flexibility on this whole thing. But it's worth a try.
So I'm not going to read the motion again, but we do have a motion on the floor moved by Councillors Steinhoff, Gray, and Hinchberger. All in favor? And that is carried. No, you're not. We have resolution moved by Beth Blackwell, Councillor Blackwell, seconded by the Deputy Mayor Clark. Whereas in 2022, Statistics Canada reported that 28% of Ontarians identify as having a disability, and whereas residents and visitors with disabilities continue to regularly face physical, attitudinal, environmental, and technological barriers that prevent them from working, shopping, traveling, volunteering, or accessing community spaces, which negatively impacts our community's economic opportunities and personal sense of belonging. And whereas both the County of Bruce and all 8 of the lower tier municipalities are obligated to and have committed to removing barriers and working toward ensuring their facilities, services, and amenities are compliant with both the Ontario with Disabilities Act and Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. And whereas improving accessibility and implementing best practice requires significant technical knowledge and expertise in order to ensure capital and operational projects, programs, services, site plans, bylaws, and more are compliant or exceed ODA AODA and other related legislation. And whereas lower tier municipalities, including those with highly engaged accessibility advisory committees, would benefit from a collaborative approach that increases their ability to access this type of knowledge, expertise, and experience. And whereas the neighboring counties of Huron and Grey, as well as others such as Elgin and Middlesex, employ accessibility coordinators that act as a single point of contact for the county itself and the lower tier municipalities. And whereas these accessibility coordinators consult on accessibility-related projects, assist with implementation of accessibility standards, providing training, communicate best practice, identify grant opportunities, and share resources with staff, committees, and the public. And whereas the County of Bruce has already taken positively aligned actions by setting a goal of becoming a barrier-free community, multi-year accessibility plan, achieving a dementia-friendly designation for Bruce County Public Libraries, introducing an age-friendly strategy, and adopting a transportation master plan that highlights the importance of accessibility. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the municipality of Kincardine requests that the County of Bruce introduce an accessibility coordinator position to act as a collaborative capacity building resource for county and lower tier staff, accessibility advisory committees, and the public, so that Bruce County can become a leader in building accessible, welcoming communities for residents and visitors of all abilities. All in favor? Carried. No, all we're doing is advocating. Already done it. But there's an official motion that the county staff is aware is coming. Consideration of bylaws. We need a mover and seconder that following bylaws are hereby read the first, second, and third time, finally passed this 9th of September. October? Is this October? October. Amendment to zoning bylaw 2003-25 for 728 North Line bylaw 2024-136, 2025 rates and fees bylaw 2024-137, plans of subdivision and development policy bylaw 2024-138, moved by councillors Hinchberger and Kavanaugh. All in favor? That's carried. Consent agenda. Items listed under the consent agenda are considered routine and are passed in one motion, except for any items which are withdrawn for discussion either tonight or in a following meeting. Any items to be withdrawn? Councillor Steinhoff-Gray, please.
I would like to withdraw if I could. Sorry, I'm looking at the numbers here. Under 8.1 A and then B and then A. Actually, no, A. Nope, Bravo again. Environmental Service Compliance Report for September 2024. One of the things that made reference in that particular report was with regards to a drinking water quality risk management assessment. And it sounded like we have some kind of assessment that's happening that happens every 5 years. It didn't really give me a lot of details, and I was wondering if it was possible to have that returned with a staff report, priority ranking based on the risk likelihood and the corresponding mitigations by cost, so that we can give that proper consideration. It was a one-liner in the report, but I would like to understand it better.
Mark, please. Can we, do you want an explanation, or would you like some written sort of report? What was your expectation?
I don't want to put him on the spot because it didn't go into detail in the report. It was more of a comeback, if he could provide that. I think it's important for us to understand, so that we can properly prioritize and fund those mitigations based on probability.
Could we get some written feedback on that line? You might need to confer with Councillor Steinhoff-Gray just to make sure you know what she needs. Okay? Is that can we ask that of you, please? Can we ask that of him?
Pick it up. I would just, he might have a comment to speak to it right now.
Or do you know the answer right now?
So through you, Mayor Craig, we the drinking water quality management standard does risk assessment, which basically has to do with ensuring compliance with all drinking water assessment threats, which would be for all drinking water systems. So typically they're done on severity, vulnerability, and then they're assessed a score. Some of those trigger critical control points, which then trigger us to implement standard operating procedures or contingency plans. So we can certainly share all those documents with the counselor. And if she has any follow-up questions or would like some follow-up data, we would be glad to put those together.
Thank you.
Counselor Hinchberger, please.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Quickly, it's 8.1 BA, the Infrastructure and Development Third Quarter Report. It'll be a question for the Manager of Environmental Services. Does the annual inspections of our water and wastewater emergency generators also include auto start testing of its capabilities so that when we do actually have a power interruption, that these generators work and give us seamless transition and maintenance of process?
Through you, Mayor Craig. So, Councillor Hinchberger, we have annual service completed by an outside firm, and then we do monthly generator runs at each site. Those are not auto. We actually staff those to ensure that we're collecting readings, that things will transition over properly. So we're not a big lover of the auto startups that are common, because at times you might not have staff there to see things. So those are completed every month by the operations staff.
What I meant was, maybe a translation here is, you could have staff present on the site, basically interrupt the normal line voltage and demonstrate that the emergency generator will start up and pick up the load. That's what I'm getting at.
That is absolutely what we do, Councillor Hinchberger. We disconnect to ensure that everything flips over properly.
Thank you very much.
So we need a mover and seconder that council approve the recommendations contained in the consent agenda dated October 9, 2024, and direct staff to proceed with all necessary administrative actions. Moved by Councillors Kavanaugh and Deputy Mayor. All in favor? And that's carried. Member of Council General announcements. Deputy Mayor, have anything for us tonight?
Thank you, Mayor. Through you. October is Women's History Month, so it's a time to recognize and celebrate the contributions of women and girls throughout our society. And happy Thanksgiving.
Councillor Hinchberger.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. As long as Deputy Mayor Clark brought up Women's History Month, my mother's no longer with us anymore, but probably the biggest influence of my life. And she had one great quote. She used to say proudly, "I share no man's opinion, for I have one of my own." And I never forget that. Like, she was a force. Councillor Kavanaugh and I had the pleasure this past Saturday of planting trees and shrubs. Over 150 were planted. I only could get 5 in the ground myself at the Alps Park. They're going to continue work in the spring of 2025 on the food forest. So great turnout, and it was great weather.
Councillor Blackwell, please.
Thank you. Through you, I have a couple, but I've tried to be quick. So this week is Fire Prevention Week, I believe. And as someone who unfortunately has had a property completely burned to the ground, but everyone got out safely because they were working smoke alarms. So please ensure that people are checking their smoke alarms, that they have safety plans, and that we can all stay safe. I know our firefighters and emergency management team are putting some great content out on social media. But also, it is the 40th anniversary of the Women's House. They're hosting their gala on October 19th. This year alone, they served more than 550 women and over 250 children, in addition to over 2,000 crisis calls. So there's certainly a service that we still unfortunately need, but we're grateful to have them in our community. Last, I wanted to thank so many of the different members of our community who have been out there doing some fall cleaning. Andrew Evans, the Huron Fringe Field Naturalist, Kincardine Lions Club, Provis Club, lots and lots of youth have been out cleaning up our beaches and local roads, getting everything looking really nice. And I just want to share my appreciation for all their hard work.
Councillor Steinhoff Gray, please.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, I'm just going to bring awareness to Shiverton, which is happening in Tiverton, October 18th through 20th, so the Friday through to the Sunday. There's a family Halloween dance happening on the Friday. The Tour of Terrors, if you're brave enough to handle it, will be occurring on the Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Hopefully you're ready for that. And then they also have a Halloween vendor village that's happening on the Saturday and Sunday, and some other festivities that will all be there at the Whitney Crawford Community Center. So I just recommend that everyone come out, and I don't see it on the advertisement, but I'm pretty confident I heard that the food truck from the airport, Cheesy Monkey, is also going to be there. So it's shaping up to be a great day. So anyone who can make it, please do so. And Mike, we missed you at the horse show. I had to move those barrels by myself. It was a sad day. Thank you.
Councillor Pranger, please.
Thank you. For those of you that haven't heard, unfortunately, the Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority head office had a catastrophic lightning strike on Sunday, October 6th. The building is uninhabitable and is currently closed. However, they are working furiously to get everything back online, servers online. Some staff are already working remotely, even though that was difficult to get them equipment and whatnot. There has been a press release. It has all the information you need in case you need to contact someone or specifically say campers need to pay bills or check out or something like that. Those superintendents are still available at the campsites. But for people with planning, ongoing planning files, you can still contact the person responsible for that file. They are working from home and servers are coming back online right now. So I'll just say that no one was hurt. No one was in the building, not even maintenance staff or anything were in the building at the time. However, they do believe if anyone was, they would have been severely hurt or killed. So we are very lucky that it was empty at the time. And we will have updates coming, I guess, for when everything gets back online. Sorry, it's not in a natural hazard area. It was struck by lightning.
Oh, you mean flooding, not that kind of hazard doesn't count.
You're not gonna get flooded.
I'm making a joke.
Councillor Hinchberger is teasing me. That's okay.
Councillor Stewart, please.
Thank you. You took one of my things, but thank you very much for mentioning it. It blew out the front doors. I mean, this thing was a major thing. I mean, it just blew out the whole building, all the electrical. Another thing is I'd like to thank the Tiverton Agricultural Society, the Lions, and everyone who participated to make the Tiverton Fall Fair a huge success. And thank for the person upstairs who made the weather even nicer. So that was great. Jane, I'd like to thank you and your staff. The fairgrounds never looked as good as they did that weekend. So I know you guys did a lot of work. So thank you very much. And I guess a few of us will be going to the Chamber of Commerce Award tomorrow night. So we'll be breaking some bread. So maybe we'll see you there or not. And that's it.
Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank you very much. And through the chair, it's hard going towards the end. I don't know why you do it. You should go first. I guess the one thing I will share is that our council currently has a vacancy and is accepting applications for someone interested in joining us. You can submit through the clerk's office during regular business hours, and that is open until October 25th.
So our drop-in center downtown Kincardine, the Bridge, is hosting a fundraising activity up at Underwood Saturday night. It is a dinner dance sort of thing, line dancing predominantly. So if you're good at that, bring your cowboy hat and your boots and away we go. And we're right in the middle of Agriculture Week. So if you have opportunity, thank a farmer for having a great breakfast today. Okay, CAO.
I have no announcements.
All right. So we need a mover and seconder. The council move into closed session pursuant to section 239(2) of the Municipal Act as amended for the purpose of considering the closed session minutes dated September 25, 2024. Trade secret or scientific, technical, commercial, financial, or labor relations information supplied in confidence to the municipality or local board, which if disclosed could reasonably be expected to prejudice significantly the competitive position or interfere significantly with the contractual or other negotiations of a person, group, or persons or organizations. Bruce Powers, Municipal Socioeconomic Existing Conditions Report. personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employee, candidates for vacancy on Accessibility Advisory Committee. And further, the council returned to regular open meeting upon completion, moved by councillors Blackwell and Hinchberger. All in favor?